The cafe table held one empty chair, and with it, Emily Carter's last shred of faith in humanity. Around her, ambitious strangers guarded their space like fortresses, laptops arranged to repel anyone desperate enough to ask. But when a tired man in a worn gray jacket approached, something in his eyes, exhaustion mixed with quiet dignity, made her say the word that would change everything. Yes. She didn't know he was Daniel Rhodes, the tech billionaire every startup founder in the room would kill to meet. She only knew he looked like someone who needed kindness. That single moment of grace would rewrite both their lives forever. If you're enjoying this story, please hit the like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this tale travels. Now, let's begin where everything changed, at a table meant for two, in a cafe full of strangers. The morning rain had finally stopped, but the sky over downtown Portland remained the color of old dishwater, gray, heavy, and unwilling to commit to anything brighter. Emily Carter stood outside Brew and Bloom Cafe, staring through the rain-speckled window at the crowd inside. Every table was full, every chair claimed. The Monday morning rush had transformed the cozy space into a battlefield of ambition, where laptop screens glowed like shields and wireless earbuds served as armor against human connection. She clutched her secondhand leather portfolio against her chest, feeling the worn edges dig into her ribs. Inside were printed copies of her design work, a carefully updated resume, and 3 different versions of her portfolio presentation, each one representing a different strategy for the interview that would happen in exactly 47 minutes. The interview that could save her. The interview that could mean her daughter Sophie would have a bedroom instead of a corner of their studio apartment. The interview that could silence the voice in her head that whispered she was failing at everything that mattered. Emily pushed through the door, and the cafe's warmth hit her like a wave, coffee-scented, slightly humid, humming with the low buzz of productivity and self-importance. She scanned the room with practiced efficiency, looking for what she knew wouldn't be there, an empty table, or even a friendly face willing to share. Nothing. Just the usual Monday crowd. Startup founders in designer hoodies, their logos proclaiming memberships and accelerators she'd never heard of. Marketing professionals with perfectly curated Instagram aesthetics, their flat whites arranged just so for the inevitable photo. Developers with 3 monitors somehow balanced across cafe tables, clearly designed for croissants and conversation, not full office setups. And then there was the judgment. Emily felt it in the way eyes flicked over her bargain rack blazer, the scuff marks on her only pair of professional shoes, the laptop bag that was actually a repurposed messenger bag from a conference she'd attended 3 years ago, back when her freelance career still felt like a choice rather than a sentence. She recognized a few faces. Former colleagues from the agency where she'd worked before going freelance, before life had gotten complicated in the ways that make you choose between career advancement and being present for the tiny human who needs you. They'd been friendly once, in that surface-level way coworkers are friendly when shared misery bonds you. Now they looked through her like she was a ghost of professional ambition past. "Excuse me, is anyone sitting here?" Emily approached a table where a woman in a pristine white blouse was typing with the kind of aggressive confidence that suggested she was either changing the world or really angry at her keyboard. The woman didn't even look up. "Yes." Emily glanced at the empty chair. No bag, no jacket, no papers. "I don't see. I'm expecting someone." The woman's eyes remained locked on her screen, fingers never pausing. "Try somewhere else." Emily's face flushed hot. She knew that somewhere else didn't exist, but she nodded anyway, backing away with the kind of apologetic shuffle that made her hate herself a little more. This was the dance she knew too well, the constant negotiation for space in a world that seemed to have no room for people who were just trying to survive rather than thrive. She tried 3 more tables, got 3 more rejections, each one delivered with varying degrees of politeness that all amounted to the same thing. "You don't belong here." Emily finally found herself in the back corner of the cafe, near the bathroom hallway where the Wi-Fi signal was weakest and the ambiance was strongest, in all the wrong ways. There was a small table, scarred and wobbly, with 2 mismatched chairs. She set down her bag and immediately began the ritual she'd perfected over months of cafe hopping. Laptop out, charger plugged in, portfolio positioned just so, phone silenced but visible in case the school called about Sophie. She had 42 minutes now. 42 minutes to review her presentation one more time, to practice the answers to questions she knew they'd ask, to transform herself from Emily Carter, struggling single mom, freelance designer barely making rent, into Emily Carter, confident professional, exactly the kind of creative mind they couldn't afford not to hire. Her laptop took 3 attempts to boot up. The battery icon showed red almost immediately, despite being plugged in for hours last night. Emily felt that familiar tightness in her chest, the one that made her wonder if this was anxiety or if 32 was too young for heart problems. Probably anxiety. She couldn't afford heart problems. The laptop finally wheezed to life and Emily opened her presentation file. The slides loaded with agonizing slowness, each one appearing like a reluctant actor taking the stage. She'd worked on this pitch for weeks, designing it on a machine that was already outdated when she'd bought it refurbished 4 years ago. But the work was good. She knew the work was good. She just needed someone else to see it too. "Mommy, I don't want to go to before-school care. Sarah's mean and she says my shoes are ugly." Sophie's voice from this morning echoed in her head. 5 years old and already learning that the world sorted people into categories, that some children had new shoes every season while others wore the same pair until their toes poked through. Emily had knelt down, retied the frayed laces, and promised her daughter that they were going to be okay, that things would get better, that this interview would change things. She'd made a lot of promises lately. She was terrified of breaking them. "Excuse me?" Emily looked up from her laptop to find a man standing beside her table. He was tall, lean in the way that suggested someone who forgot to eat when focused on work. Mid-30s, maybe. Dark hair that looked like it had been professionally cut a few weeks ago and had since been left to its own devices. He wore dark jeans, expensive running shoes that were actually worn from running rather than for fashion, and a gray jacket that had the broken-in quality of a favorite piece worn too many times to still be presentable. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. Dark brown, with the kind of exhaustion that went bone deep. Not the tiredness of someone who'd stayed up too late partying, but the weariness of someone carrying weight they couldn't put down. "Hi," Emily said, immediately moving her portfolio to make room, the automatic kindness kicking in before her brain could calculate whether this was strategic or stupid. "I'm sorry to bother you," the man said, and his voice matched his eyes, tired but genuine. "Everywhere else is completely packed. Would you mind if I sat here for just 10 minutes? I have a call I need to take, and standing on the sidewalk in this weather isn't ideal." Emily glanced at the empty chair across from her. She'd been guarding it unconsciously, the way everyone in the cafe seemed to guard their space. But looking at this stranger, she saw something that made her decision easy. He'd said please. He'd apologized for bothering her. He'd specified 10 minutes, acknowledging that he was asking for a favor rather than demanding territory. In a cafe full of people treating chairs like thrones, basic courtesy felt like a revolution. "Of course," Emily said, gesturing to the chair. "Take your time. I'm just reviewing some work for an interview." Relief flashed across the man's face, so genuine that Emily felt something loosen in her chest. "Thank you. Really, I appreciate it." He sat down with the careful movements of someone trying not to intrude more than necessary, setting a phone and a simple notebook on the table but keeping them close to his edge, maintaining the invisible boundary line that separated his space from hers. He didn't have a laptop, didn't have the usual armor of technology that everyone else wielded, just a phone, a notebook, and a demeanor that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. Emily returned to her presentation, but she was aware of him in her peripheral vision. He was looking at his phone, scrolling through what appeared to be messages, his jaw tight with the kind of tension that suggested the messages weren't good news. After a moment, he made a call. "David, it's me," he said quietly, his voice low enough that Emily had to strain to hear it despite sitting 2 feet away. "No, I'm at a cafe. I know. Look, I can't make the 9:30. Something came up with Leo this morning. He had a nightmare last night and wouldn't let me leave. I stayed until he fell back asleep." Emily tried not to listen, but in the crowded cafe, privacy was a fiction everyone pretended to maintain. She caught fragments: a son, a nightmare, a meeting being rescheduled. The man's voice carried the particular exhaustion of a parent who'd been up half the night and was now paying for it in professional complications. "I'll be there by 10. the man continued. Tell them I apologize, but family comes first. If that's a problem, he paused, listening. Good. Thank you, David. I'll see you in an hour. He ended the call and sat back, rubbing his eyes with the heels of his hands in a gesture so familiar that Emily felt an unexpected kinship. She'd made that exact same movement this morning, standing in her bathroom at 5:30, trying to decide if she could afford the time for a shower or if dry shampoo would suffice for an interview that could determine her daughter's future. The man seemed to collect himself, then noticed Emily watching. Sorry, he said. Didn't mean to bring my chaos to your table. It's not chaos, Emily said before she could stop herself. It's parenting. Something shifted in his expression, recognition, maybe, or relief at being understood without having to explain. Yeah, it is. How old is yours? 5, Emily said. Daughter, Sophie, currently convinced that before school care is a torture program designed specifically to make her life miserable. The man smiled, and it transformed his face entirely. The exhaustion was still there, but underneath it was warmth, humor, and something that looked like hope hanging on by its fingernails. Mine is 7, son, Leo, currently convinced that the monster under his bed is real, highly intelligent, and personally offended that Leo exists. Sophie went through that phase, Emily said, feeling herself relax in a way she hadn't expected. We negotiated a truce with the monster. Turned out he was afraid of tap dancing, so she tap danced by the bed every night before going to sleep. That's brilliant, the man said, leaning forward slightly. Did it work? For 3 months. Then she decided tap dancing was boring and the monster came back, so we renegotiated. Turns out the monster was also afraid of really bad singing. The man laughed, a real laugh, startled and genuine. And you just happen to have really bad singing available? I'm a mother, Emily said. Really bad singing is part of the job description. They shared a smile, the kind of moment that happens between strangers who recognize each other not as individuals, but as members of the same exhausted tribe. Single parents. Emily would bet money on it. There was a specific kind of weariness that came from being the only adult in a child's life, from making every decision alone, from lying awake at night wondering if you were doing enough, being enough, giving enough. The man glanced at Emily's laptop screen, then seemed to catch himself. Sorry, I don't mean to pry. You mentioned an interview? In about 35 minutes, Emily said, checking her phone. Design position at a tech company. It's a long shot, but... She shrugged, not wanting to voice the desperation that made this interview feel less like an opportunity and more like a life raft. May I ask which company? Innovate Digital, Emily said. They're looking for someone to lead their creative team. I'm probably not experienced enough for the role, but my friend knows someone there and got me the interview. I'm hoping my portfolio speaks louder than my resume. The man nodded slowly, something thoughtful crossing his face. Can I give you some unsolicited advice? Emily tensed slightly. She'd learned that unsolicited advice usually came in 2 flavors: mansplaining from people who knew less than she did, or well-meaning suggestions from people who didn't understand that knowing what you should do and being able to do it were separated by a chasm called survival. But something about this stranger made her say, sure. Don't apologize for your experience, he said quietly. You started by saying you're probably not experienced enough. That's the first thing you told me about this interview, which means it's probably one of the first things you'll communicate to them, even if you don't say the words out loud. Emily felt heat creep up her neck. He was right. She'd been practicing those exact words. I know I might not have all the traditional experience you're looking for, but I've sat through hundreds of interviews, the man continued. The candidates who apologize for themselves never get the job. Not because they're not qualified, but because they've already told me they don't believe they deserve it. Why should I believe in them if they don't believe in themselves? That's easy to say when you're not. Emily stopped herself, but the man finished the sentence for her. Desperate? He said gently. When you're not wondering if this is your last chance? When you don't have a kid depending on you to figure it out? Emily met his eyes and saw understanding there. Real understanding, not the performative empathy of someone who'd read about struggle in a think piece but never lived it. Yeah, she said quietly. When you're not that. I get it, the man said. But here's the thing. They already know your resume. They've already seen your experience on paper and they still called you in. That means something in your work made them think you might be exactly what they need. So don't spend the interview convincing them you're not enough. Spend it showing them what you can do. Emily felt something shift in her chest, like a door opening onto a room she'd forgotten existed. Confidence. Possibility. The idea that maybe she didn't have to apologize for still being here, still trying, still fighting. "Thank you," she said, and meant it in a way that went deeper than the words could carry. "You're welcome." The man glanced at his phone. "I should actually review some notes before my meeting. Do you mind if I stay a bit longer? I promise to be quiet." "Stay as long as you need," Emily said, returning to her laptop. They worked in companionable silence for the next 20 minutes. Emily reviewed her presentation, but now she found herself editing it with fresh eyes, removing the apologetic phrasing, strengthening her value propositions. The man across from her wrote in his notebook with the focused intensity of someone solving complex problems, occasionally pausing to stare into the middle distance before writing again. The cafe around them continued its morning symphony. Espresso machines hissing, voices rising and falling, the constant percussion of keyboards being worked like instruments. But at their small, wobbly table in the back corner, there was a bubble of mutual respect, two strangers sharing space without demanding anything from each other. It was Emily who broke the silence. "Can I ask you something?" The man looked up. "Of course." "Why did you ask if you could sit here?" Emily gestured around the cafe. "I mean, I'm glad you did, but most people in here would have just sat down without asking, or they would have demanded the chair like they had a right to it." The man was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "I ask because I remember what it's like to need space and not have it, to feel like you're constantly fighting for room in a world that doesn't think you deserve any." He paused. "And because my son taught me something important. He's 7, like I said, and he has autism. The world is overwhelming for him in ways I'm still learning to understand. He needs people to ask before they touch him, before they enter his space, before they assume they know what he needs." Emily felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "That must be challenging." "It's the best thing that ever happened to me," the man said simply. "Leo taught me that courtesy isn't weakness, that asking instead of assuming isn't inefficiency, it's respect. That the way we treat strangers when we don't have to be kind says everything about who we are." "Your son is lucky to have you," Emily said. "I'm lucky to have him," the man smiled. "Even when he's convinced the monster under his bed is planning a hostile takeover of his bedroom." They shared another smile, and Emily felt something she hadn't felt in months. Connection. Not romantic, nothing like that. Just the simple human recognition of being seen by another person who understood, who'd also spent nights wondering if they were doing enough, being enough, managing enough. "Emily? Emily Carter?" The voice cut through the moment like a blade. Emily looked up to see Amanda Richardson standing beside their table, her expression arranged in something that might pass for friendliness if you didn't look too closely at her eyes. "Amanda," Emily said, forcing her voice to stay level. "Hi." Amanda had worked at the same design agency as Emily 3 years ago. They'd been colleagues, not friends exactly, but friendly enough to share lunch occasionally and complain about demanding clients together. That was before Emily had quit to go freelance, before life had gotten complicated in all the ways Amanda's pristine, child-free, upwardly mobile existence would never understand. "Oh my gosh, I haven't seen you in forever." Amanda's voice carried that particular brightness that signaled an audience was being considered. "How have you been? What are you up to these days?" The man across from Emily had gone still, his expression neutral but watchful. "I'm good," Emily said, knowing the lie was transparent but performing it anyway. "Still freelancing, doing design work for various clients." "Still freelancing?" Amanda's eyebrows rose with practiced surprise. "Wow, I thought that was just temporary. Didn't you say you were going freelance to have more flexibility until you figured out your next move?" The words landed exactly where Amanda intended them, in that soft, vulnerable place where Emily kept all her fears about not measuring up. "It's worked out well," Emily said, her voice tight. "Oh, I'm sure it has." Amanda glanced at Emily's laptop, and her smile sharpened. Is that the same laptop you had 3 years ago? Oh, honey, you need to upgrade. How can you compete for serious clients with technology that old? Emily felt her face burn. Across from her, the man shifted slightly in his chair, his attention now fully on the conversation. I managed just fine, Emily said. Well, you're certainly resilient, I'll give you that. Amanda's tone made resilient sound like a consolation prize. I'm senior art director at Morrison & Klein now. We're doing amazing work. International campaigns, award-winning creative. You should see our office. It's incredible. That's great, Amanda. Congratulations. Thank you. We're actually looking to hire another junior designer, if you know anyone. Entry-level position, but it's a great opportunity for someone trying to break into the industry. Or, trying to break back in. Amanda's laugh tinkled like broken glass. I could put in a word for you if you want. I mean, you'd probably have to take a significant pay cut from whatever you're making freelance, but at least you'd have stability. Benefits, grown-up stuff. The man across from Emily set down his pen with deliberate care. Emily felt him tense, though his face remained impassive. I appreciate the offer, Emily said, her voice flat. But I'm actually interviewing for a senior position this morning. Oh? Amanda's surprise looked genuine this time. Where? Innovate Digital. Amanda's expression flickered. Emily caught envy, resentment, and something that looked like genuine shock. Innovate Digital? They're huge. Wow. I didn't know you were operating at that level. I'm not sure I am either, Emily thought, but she kept her face neutral. Well, Amanda said, recovering quickly, I hope it works out for you. I really do. It would be amazing to see you land something like that, especially given, everything. She gestured vaguely, encompassing Emily's worn clothes, old laptop, and general aura of barely keeping it together. Thank you, Emily said through clenched teeth. Amanda finally seemed to notice the man sitting across from Emily. Her gaze slid over him dismissively. Worn jacket, notebook instead of a laptop, quiet demeanor. Clearly not worth her attention. Anyway, I should get back to my table. We're strategizing a pitch for a major tech client. Super exciting. It was good to see you, Emily. Good luck with your interview. Let me know if the junior position interests you. She walked away, her heels clicking against the floor with the confidence of someone who'd never had to doubt her place in the world. Emily sat frozen, humiliation burning through her veins like acid. She wanted to disappear, wanted to rewind time and never walk into this café, never sit at this table, never expose herself to Amanda's particular brand of casual cruelty wrapped in concern. That, the man said quietly, was one of the most impressive displays of insecure sadism I've witnessed in a professional setting, and I've sat through venture capital pitch meetings. Emily laughed, a startled, slightly broken sound. That was Amanda being kind. You should hear her when she's actually trying to hurt someone. I don't think I need to. The man's jaw was tight. She accomplished her goal, which was making you doubt yourself right before your interview, making you feel small, making you question whether you deserve to be in that room at Innovate Digital. He leaned forward slightly. Do not let her succeed. Emily met his eyes and saw something fierce there. Anger on her behalf, protective in a way that made her chest ache. I'm trying not to. The laptop comment was particularly calculated, the man continued. She attacked your tools to make you feel inferior about your work. That's manipulation 101. Your work isn't defined by the machine you created on. It's defined by your ideas, your vision, your execution. Easy to say when you probably have the latest MacBook Pro, Emily said, then immediately regretted the bitterness in her voice. But the man didn't take offense. Instead, he smiled slightly. I built my first company on a laptop that was older than your current one. It crashed during investor presentations, twice. I showed up to meetings with backup files on a thumb drive and an apology prepared. You know what I learned? What? The people worth working with don't care about the laptop. They care about the work. And the people who judge you for your tools are usually the ones who can't tell the difference between expensive equipment and actual talent. Emily felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back furiously. She would not cry. Not here, not in front of this kind stranger who was already seeing too much of her desperation. Thank you, she whispered. You don't have to thank me for stating facts. The man checked his phone, then looked back at Emily. What time is your interview? 9:30, about 15 minutes. Okay. Can I see your resume? Emily hesitated. Why? Because I've read about 10,000 resumes in my career, and I'm guessing yours might benefit from a quick review. Not because there's anything wrong with it, he added quickly, seeing her expression, but because I know what hiring managers look for, and sometimes a small adjustment can make a big difference. Emily pulled up her resume file and turned her laptop toward him. He studied it for a long moment, his eyes moving across the screen with focused intensity. You're underselling yourself, he said finally. These bullet points, they're describing tasks, what you did, but they're not showing impact. What changed because of your work? What improved? What problems did you solve? I don't know how to quantify creative work, Emily admitted. Yes, you do. He pulled the laptop closer, and Emily noticed his hands for the first time. No wedding ring, nails cut short, a small scar across his right thumb. This one here, created marketing materials for product launch. That's fine, but it's generic. What if you said, designed integrated marketing campaign that increased product visibility by, what were the results? The client said engagement went up 30% in the first month. There it is. Designed integrated marketing campaign that drove 30% increase in customer engagement, leading to successful product launch and expanded client relationship. You see the difference? Emily did. She saw how her work suddenly had weight, had measurable impact, had value that went beyond just showing up and doing tasks. They spent the next 10 minutes revising her resume, the man pointing out places where she could strengthen her language, where she could add specificity, where she could demonstrate leadership even in freelance roles. His feedback was direct but never cruel, specific but not overwhelming. He seemed to understand instinctively where her skills lay and how to help her communicate them clearly. There, he said finally, turning the laptop back to her. That's better. Not because the work changed, the work was always good, but now the resume reflects what you actually accomplished. Emily read through the revised version and felt something shift inside her. This resume didn't belong to someone apologizing for still being here. It belonged to someone who'd survived, adapted, and continued creating despite circumstances that would have broken most people. This is really good, Emily said, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you, really. I don't know why you took the time to help me, but everyone deserves an advocate, the man said simply. Especially people who are too busy surviving to advocate for themselves. You let me sit at your table when you didn't have to. This is me paying that forward. Emily glanced at her phone. 9:20. I should get going. The office is about 10 minutes away, and I want to be a few minutes early. Good luck, the man said. You're going to do great. I hope so. Emily began packing up her laptop, then paused. I didn't get your name. The man smiled. Daniel. Well, Daniel, thank you. For the advice, the resume help, and for reminding me that not everyone in this city is like Amanda. Most people aren't, Daniel said. Amanda is just louder. Emily laughed and felt lighter than she had in weeks. She gathered her things, gave Daniel a last smile of gratitude, and headed for the door. Behind her, Daniel watched her leave, something thoughtful in his expression. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. David? It's me again. Quick question. Who's interviewing for the creative director position at Innovate Digital this morning? Interesting. Do me a favor. If they hire anyone else, I want to know why. And if they don't hire Emily Carter, I want her resume sent to me directly. Because I just spent 20 minutes talking to her, and she's exactly the kind of person we need more of in this industry. Trust me on this one. He ended the call and sat back, watching through the cafe window as Emily disappeared around the corner, walking toward an interview that might just change her life, with no idea that the tired stranger who'd asked to share her table had already decided she deserved a chance, whether Innovate Digital was smart enough to give it to her or not. Daniel Rhodes sat in the quiet cafe corner for another 5 minutes after Emily left, his notebook forgotten, his mind turning over the conversation they'd just had. There was something about her, not just the obvious struggle etched into every careful choice she made, from the worn portfolio to the practiced apologies, but the dignity underneath it all. The way she'd said yes to a stranger asking for space when everyone else in this room hoarded chairs like dragons hoarding gold. The way she'd listened to his parenting story without judgment, without the usual discomfort people showed when he mentioned Leo's autism. The way she'd laughed about tap dancing monsters, finding joy in the small absurdities of raising a child alone. He recognized her because he'd been her once. Not the struggling freelancer part. His path had been different. But the parent trying to hold everything together with willpower and hope, wondering if you were doing enough, being enough, giving enough. The person who absorbed cruelty from people like Amanda Richardson without fighting back because fighting back required energy you were saving for survival. Daniel checked his phone. 9:25. He needed to leave for his own meeting, the one he'd rescheduled because Leo had woken up screaming at 2 a.m, convinced the monster was real this time, truly real, and no amount of rational explanation could penetrate the terror of a 7-year-old's nightmare. So Daniel had climbed into Leo's bed, held his son's small body against his chest, and stayed there until dawn began bleeding gray light through the curtains, and Leo's breathing finally evened into sleep. He'd been late getting Leo to school, late getting himself ready, late to everything because being on time required a life that ran on predictable rails. And parenting Leo meant living in beautiful chaos where schedules were suggestions and the most important meetings were the ones that happened at 2 a.m. in a bedroom that smelled like lavender nightlights and childhood fear. But he wouldn't trade it. Not for anything. Daniel gathered his notebook and phone, leaving a generous tip for the barista who'd been patient with the morning rush, and headed toward the door. The cafe had started to thin out slightly as the first wave of ambitious productivity seekers headed off to their 9 o'clock obligations. He was halfway to the exit when a voice cut through the ambient noise. "Oh my God, is that Daniel Rhodes?" Daniel kept walking. He'd learned that sometimes you could avoid these moments by simply pretending you hadn't heard, by moving quickly enough that engagement became awkward. But the voice came again, louder this time, performative in its excitement. "Daniel Rhodes, it is you!" He stopped, took a breath, and turned around. A young man in his 20s was standing up from a table near the window, laptop forgotten, his face arranged in an expression of calculated enthusiasm that Daniel recognized immediately. Networking face. The expression of someone who'd just spotted an opportunity and was already calculating how to leverage it. "Hi," Daniel said neutrally. "I'm Jason Chen," the young man said, closing the distance between them with the aggressive friendliness of someone used to inserting themselves into spaces uninvited. "I'm a founder. We're building an AI-powered platform for optimizing workplace productivity. We're actually in the middle of raising a Series A. I've been trying to get a meeting with Helion Ventures for months." Around them, Daniel felt the cafe's attention shift. Conversations didn't stop exactly, but they modulated, became performative. People who'd been deeply absorbed in their work suddenly had one ear turned toward this interaction. The name Helion Ventures had done what it always did, transformed a casual space into a networking opportunity, turned a chance encounter into a potential transaction. "I'm not taking meetings right now," Daniel said politely, "but you can reach out to my assistant David through the website. He handles all scheduling." "I totally understand you're busy," Jason continued as if Daniel hadn't spoken. "But since you're here, could I just give you the 30-second pitch? I promise it's revolutionary. We're basically taking everything people hate about workplace communication and—" "Jason," Daniel interrupted gently, "I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I'm not the right person for this conversation. Helion Ventures has a structured pitch process. Use it." Jason's expression flickered. Disappointment, resentment, recalculation. "Right, of course. It's just that when you see an opportunity, you have to take it. That's what entrepreneurship is about." "Entrepreneurship is about a lot of things," Daniel said. "Respecting boundaries is one of them." He turned to leave again, but the damage was done. The cafe had fully woken up now to his presence. He could feel eyes tracking him, could see phones being pulled out with the casual stealth of people pretending they weren't photographing him. Within minutes, someone would post to Twitter or LinkedIn. "Just saw Daniel Rhodes at Brew and Bloom, looking tired but approachable. Should I have pitched him?" And the responses would debate whether approaching him had been brave or inappropriate, whether Jason Chen had missed his shot or dodged a bullet. Daniel hated this part. Not the recognition itself. He understood that building a public company meant accepting a certain level of visibility. But he hated what recognition did to spaces, how it transformed normal human interactions into transactional performances, how it made people see him as a resource to be extracted, rather than a person who just wanted to drink coffee and review notes in peace. He was almost to the door when another voice stopped him. This one he recognized. Well, 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 Daniel Rhodes slumming it at a neighborhood cafe. What happened? Did your private chef take the day off? Daniel turned to find Marcus Webb lounging at a corner table, his laptop displaying what looked like a pitch deck, his entire posture radiating the particular smugness of someone who thought they were much cleverer than they were. Marcus was a serial entrepreneur. Emphasis on serial, as in he started companies with impressive frequency and folded them with equal reliability. He was also a vocal critic of what he called legacy tech bros, who'd gotten lucky once and now acted like royalty. Daniel had never said more than 10 words to Marcus Webb in his entire life, but Marcus had somehow decided they were rivals in a competition only Marcus knew existed. "Marcus," Daniel said evenly, "good to see you." "Is it, though?" Marcus grinned, and Daniel recognized the performance beginning. Marcus had an audience now. The cafe was absolutely paying attention, and he was going to milk it. "I mean, you look like you just rolled out of bed. Rough night? Or are you just embracing the whole eccentric billionaire who dresses like he shops at thrift stores aesthetic?" A few people laughed. The nervous laughter of an audience unsure whether they were witnessing banter or cruelty, but entertained either way. "Something like that," Daniel said, refusing to engage. "I heard Helion's Q3 earnings were disappointing," Marcus continued, his voice carrying across the cafe with the projection of someone who'd taken acting classes in college and never quite let it go. "Must be tough trying to stay relevant when younger, hungrier companies are innovating circles around you. But hey, at least you can afford to buy the whole cafe if you need a private office, right?" Daniel felt the anger simmer low in his gut, but he kept his expression neutral. Marcus wanted a reaction, wanted Daniel to lose composure, to say something defensive or angry that could be clipped and shared and turned into content. "Daniel Rhodes snaps at entrepreneur in cafe" would be a headline Marcus would love to generate. "I hope your pitch goes well," Daniel said instead, nodding toward Marcus's laptop. "Good luck with whatever you're building." He walked out before Marcus could respond, but he heard the last comment follow him through the door. "That's right, run away. Some of us actually have work to do instead of playing at being humble." The cool morning air hit Daniel's face, and he took a breath, letting the anger dissipate. Marcus Webb was a mosquito, annoying but ultimately harmless, the kind of person who confused noise for substance and cruelty for wit. In a year, Marcus would have folded whatever company he was currently pitching and would be on to the next thing, leaving behind nothing but some angry investors and a trail of burned bridges. But the interaction left Daniel unsettled, not because of Marcus specifically, but because it reminded him of everything he hated about the tech world he'd built his life in. The performance, the constant positioning, the way every interaction was evaluated for potential extraction value, the casual cruelty wrapped in humor, the inability to just exist as a person without being transformed into a character in someone else's narrative. Emily hadn't done that. Emily had just offered him a chair. Daniel walked toward his car, checking his phone for messages. 3 texts from David, his executive assistant, and the closest thing Daniel had to a work spouse after 8 years together. One was about the rescheduled meeting. One was a heads up that the board wanted to discuss Q4 strategy. One was a photo of David's corgi wearing a tiny business suit with the caption, "Ready for Monday." Daniel smiled despite himself and was typing a response when he heard the voice. "Daddy!" He looked up to see Leo running toward him from the direction of Bridgepoint Elementary, his backpack bouncing against his small body, his face split in a grin that made Daniel's entire chest tighten with love so fierce it was almost painful. Behind Leo, moving at a more sedate pace, was Mrs. Patterson, the school's assistant administrator, and the woman who'd called Daniel an hour ago to report that Leo was having a difficult morning and might benefit from seeing his father. Daniel dropped to one knee just as Leo crashed into him, small arms wrapping around his neck with the intensity of someone who'd been holding themselves together and could finally let go. "Hey, buddy," Daniel said, holding Leo tight. I got here as fast as I could. The noise was too much, Leo said, his voice muffled against Daniel's shoulder. Everyone was yelling, and Mrs. Chen was playing the piano really loud, and Tyler kept touching my backpack even though I said no 3 times, and his voice cracked, and Daniel felt him start to shake. It's okay, Daniel said softly. You're okay now. I've got you. Mrs. Patterson reached them, slightly out of breath. She was in her 50s, kind-faced, and one of the few people at Bridgepoint who truly understood Leo's needs rather than just tolerating them. I'm sorry to call you, Mr. Rhodes. We tried the quiet corner in the sensory room, but Leo was very distressed. He kept asking for you. You did the right thing, Daniel assured her, still holding Leo. Thank you for calling. The music teacher meant well, Mrs. Patterson continued, worry lines creasing her forehead. She was trying to make morning assembly exciting. She didn't realize how overwhelming it would be for some students. It's not her fault, Daniel said, though privately he was already composing the email he'd send later about the importance of considering sensory sensitivities in school activities. Leo just needs a different kind of morning sometimes. He pulled back slightly to look at Leo's face. His son's eyes were red, his cheeks blotchy, his expression carrying that particular exhaustion that came from trying so hard to be okay and failing despite your best efforts. 7 years old and already learning that the world wasn't built for the way his brain worked, that he'd spend his life translating between his needs and everyone else's expectations. What do you say we skip the rest of the morning? Daniel suggested. We could go to the aquarium, watch the jellyfish for a while. They're very quiet. Leo's face transformed. Really? But don't you have work? I have a meeting at 10, Daniel said. But it's just a meeting. You're more important. David says you're not supposed to cancel meetings, Leo pointed out with the literal honesty of a child who'd overheard too many adult conversations. David says a lot of things, Daniel replied, pulling out his phone. But David also knows that you come first, always. He typed quickly. Not going to make the 10 o'clock, family emergency, reschedule for tomorrow or handle without me. I trust your judgment. David's response came immediately. Leo, okay? He will be, aquarium day. Good dad. Go. I'll handle the sharks here while you visit the ones at the aquarium. Daniel smiled and tucked his phone away. He looked up at Mrs. Patterson. Can you let his teacher know Leo won't be back until tomorrow? We'll make up any missed work. Of course, Mrs. Patterson said warmly. Leo, you take care of yourself today, okay? We'll see you when you're ready. Leo nodded against Daniel's shoulder, not quite ready to leave the safety of his father's arms. They walked back toward Daniel's car, Leo's hand tucked firmly in Daniel's, his small body pressed against his father's leg like a baby animal seeking shelter. Daniel felt the stares. He always did in this neighborhood, where everyone knew his name and his net worth and had opinions about both. But for once, he didn't care. Let them stare. Let them judge. Let them wonder why a billionaire was canceling meetings to watch jellyfish with his kid. They didn't understand, and Daniel didn't need them to. Leo understood. That was enough. Daddy, Leo said quietly as they reached the car. Yeah, buddy. Thank you for coming. Always, Daniel said, squeezing Leo's hand. Every single time you need me. That's the job. They drove across the city in comfortable silence, Leo gradually relaxing in his booster seat, his fingers tracing patterns on his leg in the rhythmic way that helped him process overwhelming emotions. Daniel played the playlist they'd made together. Instrumental movie soundtracks, no lyrics, nothing unpredictable. The music filled the car with gentle swells of sound that soothed rather than stimulated. The aquarium was blessedly quiet on a Monday morning, mostly empty except for a few tourists and one field trip group that was contained in the tropical fish section. Daniel paid for their tickets. The teenager at the counter did a visible double-take when she recognized him, but mercifully said nothing, and they headed straight for Leo's favorite exhibit, the jellyfish room. It was a dim, womb-like space, the walls lined with tall cylindrical tanks backlit in slowly changing colors. The jellyfish drifted through the water with hypnotic grace, their translucent bodies pulsing, tentacles trailing like thoughts suspended in liquid. The room had a bench in the center, and Leo immediately sat down, his eyes fixed on the nearest tank. Daniel sat beside him, and they watched in silence. This was what Leo needed. Not conversation, not problem-solving, not reassurance, but presence. The chance to exist without demands, to let his nervous system settle, to remember that the world contained spaces of peace even when the chaos felt overwhelming. After 15 minutes, Leo leaned against Daniel's side. "They don't have to think about school," he observed. "No," Daniel agreed. "They just float." "That sounds nice." "It does. But they also don't get to play Minecraft or eat pizza or hug their dads." "That's true," Daniel said. "So maybe having to think about school is worth it." Leo considered this. "Maybe. But I wish school could be more like this. Quiet. With pretty lights. And no Tyler touching my stuff." "What if I talk to your teacher about Tyler?" Daniel suggested gently. "We could make a plan so he knows to ask before touching your things." "Would that work?" Leo sounded skeptical, and Daniel's heart ached at the world-weariness in his 7-year-old son's voice. "It might. And if it doesn't work the first time, we'll try something else. We'll keep trying until we figure it out." "You always say that." "Because it's always true." They sat for another 20 minutes, watching the jellyfish perform their ancient dance. Leo's breathing gradually slowed, his body losing the tension that had gripped him all morning. Daniel felt his own stress begin to dissipate. The morning's accumulated frustrations. Marcus Webb's performance, Jason Chen's pitch ambush, the constant weight of being recognized and evaluated fading into background noise. This was what mattered. Not the meetings, not the company valuation, not his reputation or his legacy or whatever narrative the tech press wanted to construct about him. Just this. Sitting in the dim light with his son, watching jellyfish drift, being present for the small moments that would someday be the big memories. "Daddy," Leo said eventually, "can we get lunch at the cafe with the grilled cheese that's cut into triangles?" "The one near your school?" "Yeah, but not the school cafe, the good cafe." Daniel smiled. "You mean Brew and Bloom?" "That's the one." Leo's face brightened. "They have the good grilled cheese and the tomato soup in the special cup, and they don't play loud music." Daniel checked his watch. 11:30. The lunch rush would be starting soon, but they could probably beat the worst of it. And honestly, after this morning, sitting in a comfortable cafe while Leo ate his favorite grilled cheese sounded perfect. Better than perfect. "Let's do it," Daniel said. They drove back across the city, Leo chattering now about the jellyfish, about how he wanted to design a video game where you played as a jellyfish navigating the ocean, about whether jellyfish got lonely or if they liked being alone. Daniel listened with half his attention, the other half running through the mental checklist he could never quite turn off. Emails that needed responses, decisions that needed making, problems that needed solving. But then Leo said something that pulled Daniel fully present. "The lady who let you sit at her table was nice." Daniel glanced in the rearview mirror. "What lady, buddy?" "This morning, at the cafe. When I walked by the window looking for you, I saw you sitting with a lady. She had a computer that looked old like Grandma's, and she smiled at you like people don't usually smile." Daniel felt something shift in his chest. "You saw that?" "Mm-hmm." "Mrs. Patterson let me wait outside for a minute because I told her I saw you through the window." "The lady looked nice. Not like the people who usually want to talk to you about business stuff. She looked like maybe she has a kid too." "She does," Daniel said. "A daughter, 5 years old." "Is she nice? The daughter?" "I don't know. I didn't meet her, but her mom said she tap dances to scare away monsters, so she sounds pretty creative." Leo laughed, a real laugh, light and genuine. "That's silly, but also smart. Monsters probably aren't expecting tap dancing." "Probably not." They pulled up to Brew and Bloom, and Daniel felt a strange sense of returning to a place that had become significant in the few hours since he'd left. The cafe looked different now, less crowded, more relaxed, the lunch crowd just beginning to trickle in. He found parking on the street, helped Leo out of his booster seat, and they walked inside together. The same barista was working, a young woman with purple hair and impressive arm tattoos, who looked up when they entered and did not, Daniel noted with relief, visibly react to recognizing him. "Welcome back," she said neutrally. "Grab any table. I'll be over in a minute." Daniel guided Leo toward a table near the window, a different table from this morning, one with better light and a view of the street. Leo climbed into his chair and immediately pulled out the small sketchbook he carried everywhere, beginning to draw what looked like a jellyfish wearing a top hat. The barista came over, and Daniel recognized her name tag, Zoe. "What can I get you guys?" "Grilled cheese cut into triangles," Leo said without looking up from his drawing, "with tomato soup in the special cup, and apple juice." "You got it." Zoe smiled at Leo, then looked at Daniel. "And for you?" "Coffee, black, and whatever soup you have is fine." "We've got tomato or chicken noodle?" "Tomato." Zoe nodded and headed back to the counter. Daniel watched Leo draw, marveling as always at his son's ability to find joy in simple things, to recover from overwhelming mornings and find peace in grilled cheese and sketching. Leo's autism shaped how he experienced the world, but it also gave him gifts, intense focus, creative thinking, genuine emotion unmarred by social performance. "Mr. Rhodes?" Daniel looked up to find Amanda Richardson standing beside their table, her expression arranged in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was holding a coffee cup and a small plate with a pastry, and she radiated the kind of aggressive friendliness that signaled an agenda. "Hi," Daniel said neutrally. "I thought that was you. Oh my gosh, I saw you here this morning, but you left before I could introduce myself. I'm Amanda Richardson, Senior Art Director at Morrison & Klein. We've done some amazing work with tech companies." "Actually, I've been wanting to reach out about potential collaboration between Morrison & Klein and some of your portfolio companies. We specialize in—" "I'm having lunch with my son," Daniel interrupted gently but firmly. "This isn't a good time for business discussions." Amanda glanced at Leo as if noticing him for the first time. "Oh, of course. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize—" She paused, recalibrating. "He's adorable. How old?" 7, Daniel said, his voice flat. "What a great age. Is he in school around here?" Daniel felt the familiar protective instinct rising. People always asked about Leo with that particular tone, curious but probing, looking for information they could use or judge or gossip about later. He'd learned to recognize the difference between genuine interest and data collection. "Yes," he said, offering nothing more. "Well, he's lucky to have a dad who can take time out of his busy schedule for lunch dates." Amanda's tone had shifted slightly, becoming almost condescending. "Most executives I know are so busy they barely see their kids. But I guess when you're at a certain level, you can make your own schedule." "Something like that," Daniel said, done with this conversation. But Amanda wasn't finished. She glanced around the cafe as if confirming she had an audience, then leaned in slightly. "I actually ran into an old colleague here this morning, Emily Carter. I don't know if you noticed her. She was at that table in the back corner, the one with the wobbly leg. We used to work together before she went freelance. Poor thing is really struggling from what I can tell. Still using ancient technology, still taking whatever work she can get. She mentioned she had an interview at Innovate Digital, which seems ambitious given her current situation." Daniel felt anger flash hot and immediate. He kept his voice level. "I don't think Emily would appreciate you discussing her situation with strangers." "Oh, I'm not gossiping," Amanda said quickly, her smile brightening with false sincerity. "I'm actually trying to help her. That's why I mentioned that junior position at Morrison & Klein. She needs stability more than she needs to chase senior roles she's not qualified for. Sometimes you have to be realistic about your level, you know?" Beside Daniel, Leo had stopped drawing. His hand was still on the page, but his body had gone tense in the way that signaled he was listening, processing, becoming uncomfortable with the emotional undercurrents in the conversation. "Amanda," Daniel said, his voice dropping into the register he used in board meetings when he needed everyone to understand he was done playing. "I'm going to say this once, and I need you to really hear me. Emily Carter offered me a seat at her table this morning when I needed one. She was kind without knowing who I was or what I could do for her. That makes her approximately 1,000% more valuable than most people I meet in this industry." Amanda's smile froze. "So when you stand here and critique her technology, her ambitions, her qualifications, What I hear is someone so insecure in her own position that she needs to tear down a woman who's working twice as hard with half the resources. Daniel's voice remained quiet, but every word landed with precision. Emily was right about one thing. She's operating at a level. Just not the level you assumed. The cafe had gone quiet again, but this time Daniel didn't care. He was done with people like Amanda Richardson, done with the casual cruelty that passed for networking, done with watching good people get diminished by mediocre ones who'd confused having a title with having worth. Amanda's face had gone red. I was just trying to... You were trying to make yourself feel important by making someone else feel small, Daniel said. And you're doing it in front of my son, who's trying to eat his lunch in peace. So I'm going to ask you very politely to take your coffee, your pastry, and your need to perform superiority somewhere else. For a moment, Amanda looked like she might argue. Then she glanced around, saw the cafe watching, and seemed to realize she'd lost whatever game she thought she was playing. I apologize if I offended you, she said stiffly. That wasn't my intention. It never is, Daniel said quietly. Amanda walked away, her posture rigid with humiliation and anger. Daniel took a breath, feeling the adrenaline begin to fade, leaving behind a weary frustration. Daddy? Leo said softly. Was that lady being mean about the nice lady from this morning? Yeah, buddy, she was. That's not fair. The nice lady shared her table. No, Daniel agreed. It's not fair at all. Zoe appeared with their food, setting down plates and cups with careful precision. She caught Daniel's eye and gave him a small nod. Acknowledgement, maybe approval. Enjoy your lunch, she said. And for the record, Emily Carter is one of the kindest regulars we have. Always tips well, even when she's clearly counting pennies. Always asks how I'm doing like she actually cares about the answer. We need more people like her. Yes, Daniel said quietly. We really do. They ate their lunch in comfortable silence, Leo working methodically through his grilled cheese triangles while adding details to his top hat-wearing jellyfish. Daniel forcing himself to take slow sips of soup, even though his appetite had evaporated somewhere between Amanda's performance and his own anger. The cafe gradually filled with the lunch crowd, but their table felt like an island of calm, insulated by the morning's events and the unspoken agreement between father and son that sometimes the world was exhausting and all you could do was sit together and let it be exhausting without trying to fix it. Daniel's phone buzzed repeatedly in his pocket, David with meeting updates, board members with questions, investors with concerns. But he ignored it all. Leo needed him present, and presence meant more than physical proximity. It meant shutting out the noise, the demands, the constant pull of a company that sometimes felt like a living thing demanding to be fed with his attention, his energy, his life. Daddy? Leo said, wiping tomato soup from his chin with careful precision. Why did you get so upset with that lady? Daniel set down his spoon and considered how to answer. Leo deserved honesty, but honesty calibrated for a 7-year-old's understanding of a complex world. She was saying mean things about someone who didn't deserve it, and I don't like watching people be cruel just because they can be. But you were kind of mean back to her, Leo observed with the matter-of-fact directness that always caught Daniel off guard. You made her feel bad. You're right, Daniel admitted. I did. Do you think I shouldn't have? Leo thought about this, his face scrunched in concentration. Mrs. Patterson says we should use our words to make things better, not worse. But she also says sometimes we have to stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves. Which one was this? Both, maybe, Daniel said. I think I could have stood up for Emily without making Amanda feel quite so small. That's something I need to work on, defending people I care about without becoming the thing I'm fighting against. That sounds hard. It is hard. Being a good person is almost always harder than being a convenient one. Leo nodded solemnly, then returned to his drawing. Daniel watched his son's hand move across the page, adding what looked like a smaller jellyfish next to the first one. A parent and child, perhaps, or just two creatures learning to navigate the same waters. The cafe door opened and Daniel looked up reflexively, then felt his heart drop into his stomach. Emily Carter stood in the doorway, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed, her entire posture radiating defeat. She looked like someone who'd just had the worst hour of their life, and was now trying to figure out how to keep existing despite it. She didn't see Daniel at first. She walked to the counter with mechanical precision, ordered something in a voice too quiet to hear, then stood waiting with her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold her pieces together through sheer force of will. Daniel felt Leo's hand on his arm. "Daddy, that's the nice lady. She looks sad." "Yeah, buddy, she does." "Are you going to help her?" Daniel looked at his son, at those serious brown eyes that saw too much and felt too deeply, and made a decision. "Stay here for a minute, okay? Finish your drawing. I'll be right back." He stood and walked to the counter, arriving just as Zoe handed Emily a to-go cup of coffee. Emily took it with a whispered thanks and turned toward the door, nearly colliding with Daniel. "Oh," she said, startled. "Daniel, I'm sorry, I didn't see—" She stopped, really looking at him, and something in her expression crumbled. "I'm sorry. I can't. I need to go." "Emily, wait." Daniel's voice was gentle. "What happened?" "Nothing happened. Everything's fine." She was lying and they both knew it, but she was holding on to the lie like a life raft. "I just need to get home." "The interview," Daniel said, understanding dawning. "It didn't go well." Emily laughed, and it was the saddest sound Daniel had heard in months. "That's one way to put it. Another way would be to say it was a complete disaster, and I humiliated myself in front of 3 people who now think I'm completely unqualified to do anything more complicated than alphabetize files." Her voice cracked. "But sure, it didn't go well. That works too." Behind the counter, Zoe was pretending not to listen while absolutely listening. A few other customers had noticed the interaction, and Daniel felt the familiar weight of attention, of being watched, of having what should be a private moment transformed into potential content. "Come sit with me," Daniel said, "just for a few minutes. You shouldn't drive when you're this upset." "I'm fine," Emily insisted, but her hands were shaking so badly the coffee cup rattled. I need to pick up Sophie. I need to—" She stopped, blinking rapidly, fighting tears with visible effort. "Leo and I have a table by the window," Daniel said quietly. "We're just finishing lunch. Come sit, drink your coffee, take 5 minutes to breathe. Then you can go pick up Sophie." Emily looked like she wanted to refuse, wanted to flee, wanted to disappear into the floor and never face another human being again. But something in Daniel's expression, understanding maybe, or simple kindness without judgment, made her shoulders sag in defeat. "Okay," she whispered. 5 minutes." They walked back to the table where Leo was putting finishing touches on his jellyfish family. There were 4 now, Daniel noticed, each one slightly different in size and detail. Leo looked up as they approached, his face brightening. "Hi, you're the nice lady from this morning. My dad said you let him sit at your table." Emily managed a weak smile. "Hi. You must be Leo. Your dad told me about the monster under your bed." "He's not there anymore," Leo said seriously. "We negotiated. Now he lives in the closet, but only on weekends. During the week, he has to stay at his other house." Despite everything, Emily laughed, a real laugh this time, surprised out of her. "That's very reasonable. What made him agree to weekends only?" "Dad helped me make a contract. We wrote down all the rules. Monsters are very serious about contracts." "I'll remember that," Emily said, and Daniel saw her hand stop shaking slightly. She sat down in the empty chair, wrapping both hands around her coffee cup, like it was the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly become liquid and unstable. For a long moment, no one spoke. Leo returned to his drawing, Daniel sipped his coffee, and Emily just sat there, breathing, holding on. Finally, she spoke. "They said my work was fine, but nothing special. That my resume showed someone who'd been coasting on past achievements rather than pushing boundaries. That the creative director role required someone with vision, and what I'd shown them was competence at best." Her voice was flat, reciting facts that had been delivered like pronouncements from on high. "They said I should consider roles that matched my current level instead of reaching for positions I wasn't ready for." Daniel felt anger ignite in his chest again, hot and immediate. "Who specifically said this?" "Does it matter?" Emily's laugh was bitter. "They're right. I showed up with an old laptop, a portfolio of work I've been recycling for 2 years, and the kind of desperation that probably radiated off me like a smell. I thought updating my resume would be enough. I thought. She stopped, shaking her head. It doesn't matter what I thought. I was wrong. What you thought, Daniel said carefully, was that your work would speak for itself, that talent and creativity and problem-solving ability would matter more than the machine you created it on or the pedigree of your previous employers, and you weren't wrong about that. They were wrong about you. Emily looked at him with eyes that were too bright, too fragile. You're being kind. I appreciate it, but you weren't in that room. You didn't see their faces when I pulled out my laptop and it took 3 minutes to boot up. You didn't hear them asking about my experience leading teams and watching their expressions change when I admitted most of my recent work has been solo projects, because that's all I could find. You didn't. Her voice broke completely. I'm sorry. I shouldn't dump this on you. You have your own life, your own problems. I should go. Emily. Daniel waited until she looked at him. What's the name of the person who interviewed you? Why? Because I want to know who's making hiring decisions that stupid. Daniel, I'm serious. Who was it? Emily hesitated, then sighed. Richard Chen, head of creative, and 2 other people whose names I don't remember because I was too busy trying not to pass out from anxiety. Daniel pulled out his phone and typed quickly. David's response came within 30 seconds, and Daniel felt his jaw tighten as he read it. Richard Chen, Daniel said slowly, has been with Innovate Digital for 8 months. Before that, he was at a mid-tier agency where he was known for taking credit for his team's work and throwing junior designers under the bus when projects failed. He's currently under internal review for creating a hostile work environment. And according to my sources, Innovate Digital is hemorrhaging talent because of his leadership. Emily stared at him. Who are your sources? I know people who know people, Daniel said, which was technically true, but also a massive understatement of his access to information. The point is, Richard Chen's assessment of your work says more about Richard Chen than it does about you. That's nice to believe, Emily said quietly. But it doesn't change the fact that I don't have a job. That I'm going to have to pick up Sophie in 20 minutes and tell her we can't afford the field trip to the zoo that all her classmates are going on. That I'm going to have to figure out whether to pay full rent or full utilities this month because I can't afford both. Her hands were shaking again. I'm tired, Daniel. I'm so tired of fighting just to stay in one place, of working twice as hard for half the recognition, of watching people like Amanda Richardson coast on connections and confidence while I'm over here wondering if my daughter notices that I buy the generic cereal because the name brand is $3 more. She notices, Leo said quietly. Both adults looked at him. Leo hadn't looked up from his drawing, but his shoulders were tense, his hand still on the page. I notice when Dad buys the generic stuff instead of the good stuff, Leo continued. He thinks I don't, but I do. And I know it means money is tight, and I feel bad because I know I'm expensive. Now he did look up, his eyes meeting Emily's. Your daughter probably feels bad too, but she also probably loves you a lot and thinks you're doing your best and just wants you to be happy. The tears Emily had been fighting finally won. They spilled down her cheeks silently, and she pressed her hand to her mouth like she could push them back in through sheer will. Daniel pulled napkins from the dispenser and slid them across the table, saying nothing, giving her the space to fall apart without commentary. Leo went back to his drawing, but Daniel saw him add another jellyfish to the page. A smaller one, tucked close to one of the larger ones. Seeking shelter, maybe. Or just existing together in the same water. After a minute, Emily wiped her face and took a shuddering breath. I'm sorry, I try not to. You don't have to apologize for having feelings, Daniel said. You had a terrible morning. You're allowed to acknowledge that. It wasn't just terrible, Emily said softly. It was confirmation of everything I've been afraid of. That I'm not good enough. That I made a mistake going freelance. That I failed my daughter by choosing a career that doesn't provide stability. She stopped, shaking her head. Sorry, I'm spiraling. What if I told you, Daniel said slowly, an idea forming that felt both impulsive and absolutely right, that there's another option? Emily looked at him warily. What kind of option? I run a company called Helion Systems. We build tools and platforms for creative professionals, designers, writers, developers, artists, people who are trying to make a living doing work they love but keep running into systems that weren't built for them. He paused, watching her face. We're launching a new initiative in January, a community platform for freelance creatives. We need someone to lead it, someone who understands what it's like to be talented but overlooked, someone who's fought for every opportunity and knows exactly what barriers exist because they've hit every single one of them. Emily's expression was unreadable. Daniel, I'm not offering out of pity, Daniel said firmly. I'm offering because this morning, when I was a stranger who looked like he needed a moment of grace, you gave it to me without hesitation. No calculation, no asking what you'd get in return. Just kindness. And then I watched you handle Amanda's cruelty with dignity. I watched you prepare for an interview like your daughter's future depended on it, because it did. I saw your work on your laptop, Emily. The designs were good, really good, the kind of good that doesn't need the latest technology to shine through. You looked at my work? Emily's voice was faint. I saw it when you turned your laptop toward me to show me your resume. And I've been in this industry long enough to recognize talent when I see it. Daniel leaned forward slightly. I need someone who understands what it's like to be on the outside. Someone who won't forget where they came from. Someone who will build a platform that actually serves people instead of extracting value from them. That's not pity, Emily. That's good business. I don't understand, Emily said slowly. You're offering me a job, just like that, without even seeing my full portfolio, without references or background checks or... I'll do all of that, Daniel assured her. This isn't some handshake deal. It's a real position with a real salary, real benefits, real responsibilities. You'll interview with my team. You'll present your vision for the platform. You'll prove you're the right person for the role. But I'm telling you right now that I want you to succeed in proving it, that I'm rooting for you, that if you want this opportunity, it's yours to win. Emily was staring at him like he'd started speaking a language she'd never heard before. People don't just offer opportunities to strangers they met in cafes. Daniel smiled. You're right, they don't. But here's what I've learned over 15 years of building companies. The best people are almost never the ones aggressively networking at industry events. They're the ones showing up every day, doing good work, treating people with kindness, and hoping someone will notice. You showed me this morning that you're one of the good ones, Emily, and I'm noticing. What's the salary? Emily asked, and Daniel heard the fear underneath the practical question, the fear that this dream would dissolve the moment reality intruded. He named a figure that made Emily's eyes go wide. That's the starting salary. There's a benefits package that includes health insurance, retirement matching, and childcare assistance. We're family friendly. I built the company culture specifically to accommodate parents because I'm one myself. Flexible hours, work from home options, unlimited sick days for when your kid needs you. Because kids always need you, and I'm tired of working in an industry that pretends they don't exist. Emily's hands had gone still on her coffee cup. Why are you doing this? I told you No, I mean really. Why are you doing this? Successful people don't just hand opportunities to strangers out of kindness. There has to be something else, some angle I'm not seeing. Daniel understood her skepticism. He'd have been skeptical too once, before life had taught him that sometimes the universe put people in your path for reasons that only made sense later. You want the truth? Please. My son has autism, Daniel said quietly, and beside him, Leo looked up at the mention but didn't interrupt. For the first 4 years of his life, I watched him struggle in systems that weren't built for the way his brain works, schools that treated him like a problem to be solved, programs that demanded he conform to neurotypical expectations instead of meeting him where he was, people who looked at him and saw disability instead of different ability. His voice roughened. And I realized that I'd spent my entire career building products and platforms that did the same thing, demanded conformity, penalized difference, rewarded people who already fit the mold while pushing out everyone else. He looked at Emily, saw her really listening, not just waiting for her turn to talk. So I started asking myself, what if I built something different? What if I created spaces that worked for people who don't fit the standard template? What if I hired people based on their character and creativity instead of their credentials and connections? And this morning, when you gave me a seat without knowing anything about me except that I looked like I needed one, I saw exactly the kind of person I've been looking for." Emily's eyes were bright again, but this time it wasn't from despair. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it," Daniel said. "Say you'll come in for a real interview. Say you'll give me a chance to prove this isn't some fantasy, but an actual opportunity." "I'll think about it," Emily whispered. Then, stronger, "No, I don't need to think about it. Yes, the answer is yes. When do you want me to come in?" Daniel smiled, and beside him, Leo clapped his hands together once, his way of showing excitement without overwhelm. "David, my assistant, will be in touch tomorrow to schedule, probably later this week. Is that too soon?" "That's perfect," Emily said. "That's it. That's—" She laughed, and this time it was bright, disbelieving, shot through with hope that was just starting to believe it might be allowed to exist. "I can't believe this is happening." "Believe it," Daniel said. The cafe door opened again, and this time the person who entered made the entire room go still. It was Jason Chen, the aggressive founder from this morning, and he was flanked by two other young men in hoodies proclaiming their startup affiliations. They were talking loudly, gesturing expansively, occupying space with the unconscious entitlement of people who'd never been told they couldn't have it. Jason spotted Daniel immediately, and his face lit up with the kind of opportunistic excitement that made Daniel's skin crawl. He headed straight for their table, his companions following like pilotfish trailing a shark. "Daniel Rhodes! Man, I was hoping I'd see you again. Listen, I know you said to go through official channels, but I figured since we're both here—" He stopped, noticing Emily and Leo for the first time. His gaze slid over them dismissively, categorizing them as unimportant obstacles to his goal. "Do you mind if we steal him for a minute? We've got this pitch that's going to blow your mind." "Yes," Daniel said flatly. "I mind. I'm having lunch with my son and a colleague. We're not taking business meetings." "It'll take 5 minutes, tops," Jason pressed. "We're disrupting the entire productivity space. AI-powered, blockchain-integrated, with a tokenization model that—" "Jason," Daniel's voice dropped into that register again, the one that made boardrooms go quiet. "I'm going to say this one more time as clearly as I can. I'm not interested in your pitch. I'm not interested in your platform. I'm not interested in having this conversation. What I'm interested in is finishing my lunch with my son and my colleague without being interrupted by someone who thinks their hustle is more important than other people's boundaries." Jason's face flushed. "That's pretty harsh, man. I'm just trying to—" "You're trying to use my presence as a networking opportunity without caring that I've explicitly said I don't want to engage. That's not hustle. That's harassment." Daniel's voice remained quiet, but every word landed with weight. "And you're doing it in front of my 7-year-old son, who's learning from watching adults how to treat people. So I'm going to ask you very directly, what lesson do you want to teach him? That persistence means ignoring consent? That ambition justifies disrespecting boundaries? That people are just resources to be extracted from?" One of Jason's companions tugged his sleeve. "Dude, let's just go." But Jason was committed now, his face red, his pride wounded, his audience watching. "You know what? Forget it. Everyone said you were approachable, but you're just another out-of-touch billionaire who forgot what it's like to hustle. Some of us are actually trying to build something instead of coasting on past success." "I hope you succeed," Daniel said evenly. "I really do. And I hope when you do, you remember this moment. Remember how it felt to be dismissed. And I hope you choose to be better than I'm being right now. To be kinder, more patient, more willing to engage with people who are trying. Because you're right, I could have handled this better. But you also need to learn that being desperate doesn't give you the right to ignore someone else's no." Jason stared at him for a long moment, emotions warring across his face: anger, shame, confusion, resentment. Finally, he turned and walked out, his companions following. The cafe released its collective breath. "Daddy," Leo said quietly. "Why was he so mad?" "Because I told him no, and he's not used to hearing that word, especially not from people he thinks he needs. Mrs. Patterson says no is a complete sentence." "Mrs. Patterson is very wise," Daniel agreed. Emily had been watching the entire interaction with wide eyes. Now she spoke, her voice careful. Does that happen a lot? People approaching you like that? More than I'd like, Daniel admitted. Less than it used to because I've gotten better at creating boundaries. But yeah, it's part of the visibility that comes with success in tech. Everyone thinks you're their ticket to the next level, so they're constantly auditioning for your attention. That sounds exhausting. It is, Daniel said simply. That's why mornings like this one matter so much. Meeting someone who just offered me a chair without wanting anything in return. That's rare. That's valuable. That's worth building a relationship on. Emily smiled, and Daniel saw something shift in her expression. The beginning of confidence, maybe, or just the first fragile recognition that she might actually deserve good things happening to her. When you put it that way, I guess I should be charging a premium for my chair-sharing services. Don't, Daniel said, matching her smile. The world needs more people who give without calculating the return on investment. Leo had finished his drawing. He carefully tore the page from his notebook and slid it across the table to Emily. This is for you. It's a family of jellyfish. The big one is you, the smaller one is your daughter, and the two in the middle are me and Dad, because we're all floating in the same water now. Emily took the drawing with trembling hands, staring at the 4 jellyfish, each one unique, each one connected by the careful lines Leo had drawn between them. Leo, this is beautiful. Thank you. You're welcome. My dad says art is how we tell people things we don't have words for yet. I don't have words for why I think you should get the job, but the jellyfish do. Daniel felt his heart swell with love and pride, so intense it was almost painful. His strange, brilliant, deeply feeling son, who saw the world in ways that constantly surprised him, who created beauty out of understanding, who gave gifts that mattered because he understood what people needed before they did. I think, Emily said slowly, looking at the drawing, then at Leo, then at Daniel, that I just got very, very lucky. And I promise I'm going to work incredibly hard to deserve this chance. You already do, Daniel said. Now you just have to believe it. They sat in the cafe for another 20 minutes, talking about the platform Daniel wanted to build, about Emily's vision for supporting creative professionals, about the logistics of interviewing and onboarding and what the timeline might look like. Leo contributed occasional observations, mostly about jellyfish, but also about how his school did pickup times and whether that would conflict with Emily picking up Sophie, showing his characteristic attention to practical details that adults often overlooked. When Emily finally stood to leave, she looked different than she had when she'd arrived. The defeat was gone, replaced by something Daniel recognized because he'd felt it himself years ago. Possibility. The fragile, terrifying, exhilarating sensation of doors opening, when you'd convinced yourself you'd run out of doors to try. Thank you, she said, and the words carried weight beyond their simple syllables. For the coffee advice, for the resume help, for seeing me when I was invisible, for, her voice caught, for everything. Thank you for the chair, Daniel said, and for reminding me why I started doing this work in the first place. Emily left, walking out into the afternoon sunlight with her shoulders straight, her head high, carrying Leo's drawing like it was made of something precious, which Daniel supposed it was. He looked at his son, at this small human who'd taught him more about being a good person than any business school or leadership seminar ever could. You're pretty wise for 7, you know that? Leo considered this seriously. Mrs. Patterson says wisdom isn't about knowing everything. It's about knowing what matters. The nice lady matters. That's why we helped her. Yeah, Daniel said softly. She really does. They gathered their things and left the cafe, walking back to the car past people who were still talking about the interactions they'd witnessed. Some impressed, some critical, some already spinning the events into social media content. Daniel ignored them all. He'd learned that you couldn't control the narrative people created about you. You could only control who you actually were when no one was watching, when the cameras were off, when the only witness was a 7-year-old with autism who noticed everything and judged nothing except the truth of your intentions. As they drove across the city toward home, Leo said something that made Daniel's hands tighten on the steering wheel. Daddy, when I grow up, I want to be like you. Not the rich part or the famous part. The part where you help people who need help. That's the good part. Daniel had to take a breath before he could speak. That's the best part of me, buddy, and you're the one who taught me how. They drove in silence after that, the instrumental soundtrack playing softly, the afternoon sun slanting through the windows, casting everything in golden light. And Daniel thought about Emily, about Amanda, about Jason and Marcus, and all the other people who'd crossed his path that morning, about how easily things could have gone differently, about how one small choice, offering a stranger a chair, saying yes when you could have said no, choosing kindness when indifference would have been easier, could change everything. He thought about Leo's drawing, about 4 jellyfish floating in the same water, about the invisible connections that bound strangers into something that looked like family if you squinted right. And he thought about tomorrow, about the email he'd send to his team, about the interview they'd schedule, about the platform they'd build together. But mostly, he thought about hope, about how fragile it was, how easily crushed, how desperately people needed it, and about how, sometimes, hope looked like a table with an empty chair and someone kind enough to share. The email from David arrived at 6:43 the next morning, while Emily was standing in her kitchen trying to decide if she had enough coffee grounds for a full pot, or if she needed to stretch them with hot water and hope. Her phone buzzed on the counter, and she grabbed it with one hand while Sophie ate cereal at their small table, humming a song Emily didn't recognize but that apparently involved princesses and dinosaurs becoming best friends. The subject line read, "Interview scheduled, Helion Systems," and Emily's heart did something complicated in her chest, half sore, half plummet, like it couldn't decide if this was the best or scariest thing that had happened to her in years. She opened the email with trembling fingers. "Ms. Carter, Mr. Rhodes has asked me to schedule your interview for the Creative Community Platform Director position. Would Thursday at 10 work for your schedule? The interview will be conducted at our headquarters downtown and should take approximately 2 hours. You'll meet with Mr. Rhodes, our head of product development, Sarah Chen, and our community manager, Marcus Rivera. Please bring your portfolio and be prepared to present your vision for building a platform that serves independent creative professionals. Mr. Rhodes has specifically requested that you not spend interview prep time worrying about technology or equipment. He's interested in your ideas, not your laptop. If Thursday doesn't work, please let me know your availability and we'll accommodate. Best regards, David Park, Executive Assistant to Daniel Rhodes." Emily read it 3 times, each pass confirming that yes, this was real, this was happening. This wasn't some fever dream conjured by desperation and too little sleep. Thursday was in 3 days. 3 days to prepare a presentation that could change her daughter's life. 3 days to transform from Emily Carter, struggling freelancer, into Emily Carter, viable candidate for a director-level position at a company she'd only heard of yesterday. "Mommy, you're smiling really big," Sophie observed, milk dribbling down her chin. "Did something good happen?" Emily looked at her daughter, 5 years old, wearing mismatched pajamas because the matching sets had long since worn through, her hair in lopsided pigtails because Emily's hands had been shaking too badly this morning to do them properly. Sophie, who'd heard "we can't afford that" so many times, it had become background music to her childhood. Sophie, who deserved so much more than barely getting by. "Yeah, baby," Emily said, her voice thick. "Something really good happened. Mommy has a job interview on Thursday, a really important one." "Will you get the job?" Sophie asked with the straightforward logic of someone who didn't yet understand that wanting something desperately didn't guarantee getting it. "I don't know," Emily admitted, "but I'm going to try my absolute hardest." That's what you always say when I'm scared to try something new, that trying your hardest is what matters, not if you're the best. Sophie took another bite of cereal, then added with devastating sincerity, "So you're already doing good, Mommy, even if they don't give you the job." Emily had to turn away, pressing her palms against the counter, fighting the tears that seemed to live just beneath her surface these days, always ready to spill over at the slightest provocation. How did 5-year-olds do that? How did they see straight to the heart of things, strip away all the adult anxiety and fear, and offer wisdom that felt like absolution? "Thank you, sweetheart," Emily managed. "You're absolutely right." She spent the morning after drop-off in a frenzy of research. She'd heard of Helion Systems. Anyone in tech had heard of Helion Systems. But she'd never paid close attention because companies at that level felt like distant planets, interesting to know about but irrelevant to her daily orbit. Now she dove deep, learning everything she could find. Helion had started 12 years ago as a project management tool for creative teams. Daniel Rhodes had founded it in his late 20s with two partners who'd eventually left the company to pursue other ventures. What made Helion different, Emily discovered, was its philosophy. Where other productivity platforms treated workers as efficiency problems to be optimized, Helion's tools were designed around the reality of human limitations, the need for breaks, for flexibility, for accommodating life outside work. The company had grown steadily, rather than explosively, prioritizing sustainable growth over venture capital pressure to scale at any cost. They were profitable. They were respected. And according to every interview she could find with Daniel Rhodes, they were committed to building technology that served people rather than demanding people serve technology. Emily found an interview from 3 years ago where Daniel had discussed Leo's diagnosis and how it had transformed his entire approach to business. "I used to think accessibility was a checkbox," he'd said, "something you added after building the core product. But watching my son navigate a world that wasn't designed for him made me realize that accessibility isn't a feature, it's a philosophy. It's asking, who are we leaving out, at every stage of development, and being willing to rebuild when the answer is uncomfortable." She watched him speak on a panel about work-life balance in tech, where he'd argued passionately that the industry's glorification of overwork was both unsustainable and exclusionary. "We lose incredible talent because we've decided that being a good parent is incompatible with being a good employee," he'd said. "That's not a law of nature. That's a choice we've made, and we can make a different one." By noon, Emily had filled 3 notebooks with ideas, sketches, frameworks for the platform she wanted to build. She understood now what Daniel was trying to create, not just another tool, but a space that acknowledged the reality of being a creative professional in 2025. The feast or famine cycle of freelance work, the isolation of working alone, the constant negotiation between artistic integrity and financial survival. The way being good at your craft didn't automatically translate into being good at marketing yourself, managing clients, or navigating the business side of creativity. She worked through lunch, too absorbed to notice hunger, filling page after page with possibilities. A matching system that paired freelancers with clients based on values and work style, not just skills and budget. A resource library created by and for independent professionals, contract templates, pricing guides, client red flag warnings. A mentorship program connecting established creatives with those just starting out. Community guidelines that prioritize psychological safety and mutual support over competition and comparison. It was 3:15 when her phone rang, jolting her out of the flow state she'd fallen into. The number was unfamiliar, and Emily's first thought was debt collector, but she answered anyway because ignoring problems had never made them disappear. "Is this Emily Carter?" The voice was female, professional, with an edge Emily couldn't quite identify. "Yes, this is Emily." "This is Stephanie Morgan from Innovate Digital. I'm the VP of Operations. I'm calling about your interview yesterday with Richard Chen." Emily's stomach dropped. Were they calling to tell her she'd somehow failed even worse than she'd thought? To inform her she was now blacklisted from the entire industry? "Oh, hello." "I want to apologize," Stephanie said, and the edge in her voice became clear. It was anger, barely controlled. "Richard's conduct during your interview was completely unacceptable. I've reviewed the notes from your session, and I'm frankly appalled at both his assessment and his behavior." Emily sat down slowly. "I don't understand." "Richard told you your work was unremarkable and that you weren't ready for director-level responsibilities. Is that correct?" "Yes," Emily said carefully. "That assessment," Stephanie said, her words clipped with fury, "is contradicted by every other piece of feedback from your interview. Our design lead who sat in noted that your portfolio showed consistent excellence across multiple styles and client needs. Our product manager was impressed by your problem-solving approach, and I personally reviewed your work last night after receiving a complaint about Richard's behavior, and I found it to be exactly what we're looking for." "A complaint?" Emily's mind was reeling. "From who?" "That's confidential," Stephanie said. "But what I can tell you is that Richard Chen is currently on administrative leave pending an investigation into his treatment of candidates and his own team members. And I'm calling to offer you the position, if you're still interested." The world tilted sideways. Emily gripped the edge of her table, trying to process words that felt like they were coming from very far away. You're offering me the job? The creative director position? Yes. Pending reference checks and background verification, of course. The salary would be... She named a figure that was less than Daniel had mentioned, but still more than Emily had made in the past 2 years combined. With full benefits starting immediately, 3 weeks vacation, and a signing bonus to help with relocation if needed. Emily couldn't breathe, couldn't think. This was exactly what she'd wanted 24 hours ago. Validation, security, a real position at a real company. It was the answer to months of prayers she'd been too tired to articulate. It was everything she'd walked into that interview hoping for. So why did it feel wrong? Can I have some time to think about it? Emily heard herself say. Of course. If Stephanie was surprised, her voice didn't show it. I understand this is a big decision. Can you let me know by Friday? Yes. Thank you. I really appreciate the call. Thank you for your patience with our process. And again, I apologize for Richard's behavior. That's not who we are as a company. Emily ended the call and sat in stunned silence, staring at her notebook full of ideas for Daniel's platform, at the research she'd been doing all morning, at the vision she'd been building for something that felt important in a way that went beyond just having a paycheck. Innovate Digital was offering security, stability, everything she'd been fighting for, a director title, respect, the ability to tell Sophie yes instead of not right now, or we can't afford that, or maybe next month. But Helion Systems was offering something else, the chance to build something meaningful, to work with someone who understood what it meant to be different, to struggle, to fight for space in a world that didn't think you deserved any, to create a platform that could help people like her, talented, hardworking, desperate for someone to see past their circumstances to their potential. Emily pulled out her phone and stared at David's email. Thursday at 10. She still had the interview. She could go, could present her ideas, could see if the reality matched the possibility Daniel had sketched at that cafe table. And then she could make an informed decision between two actual options instead of desperately grasping at whatever lifeline appeared. That realization that she had choices, that she wasn't just surviving but actively deciding the direction of her life, made her start crying again. But this time they were different tears. Not despair or exhaustion or fear, but relief so profound it felt like her body was releasing months of accumulated tension all at once. She texted back to David. Thursday at 10 works perfectly. Thank you for the accommodation about equipment. I'll be there. His response came within minutes. Excellent. The address is 847 Jefferson Street, 15th floor. Security will have your name. Looking forward to meeting you. Emily spent the next 3 days preparing like her life depended on it, because in a very real sense, it did. She refined her presentation, reaching out to 3 freelance friends to test her ideas and get feedback. She practiced in front of her bathroom mirror, timing herself, adjusting her pacing, learning to present with confidence instead of apology. She bought a new blouse from the clearance rack at Target, nothing fancy, but clean and professional and free of the coffee stains and frayed cuffs that marked her current work wardrobe. She told Sophie about both interviews, about having to make a choice, about how sometimes the scariest option was also the right one. Sophie listened with the serious attention she gave to important matters, and then declared that Emily should pick the place with the nicest bathrooms because that shows they care about details. Emily laughed until her sides hurt, then added bathroom quality to her mental evaluation criteria because honestly, Sophie wasn't wrong. Thursday morning arrived gray and drizzly, the kind of Portland weather that felt like the city's default setting. Emily dropped Sophie at school with extra hugs and promises that she'd hear all about the interview at pickup. She drove downtown with her portfolio, her notes, her carefully rehearsed presentation, and a stomach full of butterflies that felt less like nerves and more like anticipation. The Helion Systems building was modern, but not aggressively so. Glass and steel softened with wood accents and green spaces, the kind of architecture that suggested money, but not excess, success, but not arrogance. Emily found parking in the visitor lot and took 3 deep breaths before getting out of her car. The lobby was beautiful, not in the cold, minimalist way of most tech company lobbies, but in a way that felt intentional about human comfort. There were actual plants, Not the corporate plastic kind, but real, thriving greenery. The seating areas looked designed for actual sitting, not for looking good in architectural photos. The lighting was warm rather than harsh, and the art on the walls featured local artists whose names Emily recognized from the small galleries she could never afford to buy from. Emily Carter? The security guard at the desk smiled warmly. Mr. Park called down to let us know you'd arrived. I'll get you a visitor badge, and someone will come escort you up. The someone turned out to be David Park himself, mid-40s, Korean-American, with kind eyes behind stylish glasses, and a sweater that probably cost more than Emily's rent, but somehow didn't look pretentious. He greeted her with a firm handshake and a genuine smile. "It's wonderful to finally meet you in person," he said as they walked toward the elevators. "Daniel hasn't stopped talking about your conversation at the café. I think he's more nervous about this interview than you are." "That seems unlikely," Emily said, then wondered if honesty was the right strategy. But David just laughed. "You'd be surprised. He cares deeply about this platform. It's not just another product launch for him. It's personal, which means he's terrified of getting it wrong or hiring someone who doesn't share the vision." He pressed the button for the 15th floor. "No pressure, though." "Oh, none at all," Emily said dryly, and David's laugh was warmer this time. The 15th floor was open concept but thoughtfully designed, with plenty of quiet spaces and enclosed rooms for people who needed auditory peace. Emily noticed the adjustable lighting, the variety of seating options, the sensory-friendly design elements that spoke to Daniel's commitment to accessibility. This wasn't a workspace that demanded conformity. It was one that acknowledged human diversity and designed for it. David led her to a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, the rain creating patterns on the glass that caught the light. 3 people were already there. Daniel, standing by the window in dark jeans and a button-down shirt that looked significantly more put together than his cafe outfit. A woman in her 30s with sharp eyes and an intelligent face, and a man who radiated the kind of warmth that suggested he was either genuinely kind or incredibly good at faking it. "Emily," Daniel said, and his smile was so genuine that Emily felt her nervousness ease slightly. "Thank you for coming. I want you to meet Sarah Chen, our head of product development, and Marcus Rivera, who manages our existing community initiatives." They shook hands, and Sarah's grip was firm without being aggressive. "I've been looking forward to this," she said. "Daniel forwarded some of the ideas you discussed at the cafe. I have about 1,000 questions. And I'm just excited to potentially have someone who actually understands community building from a user perspective instead of a metrics perspective," Marcus added. "No offense to metrics, but they're not everything." "They're not nothing either," Sarah countered with a grin that suggested this was an ongoing friendly debate. Emily liked them immediately. There was no performance here, no posturing, just people who were good at their jobs and secure enough not to need to prove it constantly. "Before we start," Daniel said, "I want to be transparent about something. We know you received an offer from Innovate Digital yesterday." Emily's eyes widened. "How did you—" "David has excellent sources," Daniel said with a slight smile, "and we're not interested in playing games or putting pressure on you. If Innovate Digital is the right choice, we'll be disappointed, but we'll understand. What we're hoping is that by the end of this interview, you'll have enough information to make a real decision. So ask us anything, challenge us, push back. This isn't a performance. It's a conversation about whether we're the right fit for each other." Emily took a breath and decided to match his honesty. "Innovate Digital is offering more money and a title I've been working toward for years. Walking away from that to take a risk on a new platform at a company I didn't even know I wanted to work for until 3 days ago feels objectively crazy." "It does," Daniel agreed. "So why are you here?" "Because," Emily said slowly, working through the thought as she spoke, "Innovate Digital is offering me a job. You're offering me a mission. And I spent yesterday trying to figure out which one matters more, and I kept coming back to something my daughter said. She asked me if I was going to get the job, and when I said I didn't know, she told me that trying my hardest was what mattered, that I was already doing good even if I didn't get what I wanted." She met Daniel's eyes. "I've been trying hard just to survive for 2 years, working hard to keep my head above water, to give my daughter a decent life, to not completely fall apart. And that's important. Survival is important. But I don't want to just survive anymore. I want to do something that matters. I want to build something that helps people like me feel less alone in how hard this is. And I think that's what you're offering. Not just a salary, not just a title, but a chance to matter. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Sarah leaned forward, her expression intense. Tell me what you'd build. If money and technical limitations weren't factors, if you could create exactly what independent creatives needed, what would it look like? Emily opened her portfolio. Not to the polished work samples, but to the pages and pages of notes she'd made over the past 3 days. And then she started talking. She talked about the isolation of freelance work and how the platform could create genuine connection without forced networking. She talked about the fear of pricing yourself too low or too high, and how transparency around rates could help everyone. She talked about the imposter syndrome that came with being self-taught or non-traditionally trained, and how the platform could validate different paths to expertise. She talked about childcare, about how client calls during school pickup created impossible choices, about healthcare, about how losing employer-sponsored insurance had been terrifying, about the feast or famine cycle of freelance income, and how the platform could help smooth it through community-supported systems, about the exploitation, the clients who asked for free work disguised as auditions, the scope creep, the payment delays, the casual disrespect for creative labor. And underneath all of it, Emily said, her voice carrying passion she hadn't known she still possessed, there's this constant message that if you're struggling, it's your fault. That you're not hustling hard enough, not networking smart enough, not optimizing effectively enough. That success is just one more productivity hack away. But that's not true. The system is broken. It was built for people with safety nets and connections and resources, and then it tells everyone else they're failing when they can't make it work with willpower alone. She looked around the table at 3 faces that were actually listening, not just waiting for their turn to talk. So what I want to build is a platform that tells the truth, that says yes, this is hard, and no, it's not all your fault, and here are actual resources that might help. Not inspiration porn, not fake positivity, but real support from people who understand because they've been there too. Sarah was making notes, her pen flying across paper. Marcus was nodding, his expression suggesting she'd articulated something he'd been thinking but couldn't quite voice. And Daniel was looking at her with an expression that made Emily's chest tighten, recognition, maybe, or validation, or just the simple acknowledgement of being heard. Questions? Emily asked, suddenly aware she'd been talking for nearly 20 minutes without interruption. About 1,000, Sarah said. But let's start with implementation. You're describing something ambitious, multiple interconnected systems, community moderation, verified resources, matching algorithms. How do you prioritize? What gets built first? Emily didn't have to think about it. Trust. Everything else fails if people don't trust the platform. So we start by building the smallest possible version of one feature, maybe the rate transparency tool. And we do it so well, so thoughtfully, with such clear respect for user privacy and autonomy that people tell their friends. We grow slowly. We listen constantly. We iterate based on actual needs, not assumed ones. And we never ever prioritize growth metrics over user well-being. That's going to make investors nervous, Sarah observed. Then we find investors who share our values, Emily said. Or we fund development through other means. I'd rather build something small that works than something massive that exploits. Spoken like someone who's been exploited, Marcus said gently. Repeatedly, Emily confirmed. And I'm tired of platforms that treat users like resources to be extracted. I want to build something different, something that actually serves the people it claims to help. They spent the next hour diving into details, technical requirements, budget constraints, timeline expectations, team structure. Emily admitted what she didn't know, plenty, and demonstrated how she'd learn it. She asked questions about Helion's company culture, their decision-making processes, their tolerance for experimentation and failure. She challenged some of Sarah's technical assumptions and agreed with others. She debated community moderation philosophy with Marcus and discovered they had different but complementary perspectives. It felt less like an interview and more like the early stages of collaboration, messy, energizing, full of possibility. Emily lost track of time completely, so absorbed in problem-solving that she forgot to be nervous. She forgot about her old laptop, her discount blouse, her lack of traditional credentials. She just focused on the work, on the vision, on the potential to build something meaningful. Finally, David knocked gently on the conference room door. I hate to interrupt, but Emily needs to pick up her daughter in 45 minutes, and traffic is going to be terrible. Emily checked her phone and felt time snap back into focus. 2:15. They'd been talking for over 4 hours. I'm so sorry. I completely lost track of... Don't apologize, Daniel said. That's exactly what we were hoping would happen. When you're working on something that matters, time disappears. That's how you know it's right. They walked Emily back to the elevator, and in the quiet of the lobby, Daniel pulled her aside slightly. You don't have to decide right now. Take the time you need. Talk to Sophie. Make the choice that's best for your family. What would you do? Emily asked. If you were me, with my circumstances, which would you choose? Daniel was quiet for a moment. I'd choose the thing that scared me more, because the safe choice is rarely the one that changes your life. But I'm also a single father who's been where you are, lying awake at 3 a.m., wondering if I was making decisions that would hurt my kid. So I understand if you choose security. There's no wrong answer here, Emily, just different paths. Emily nodded, her throat tight. Thank you for all of this, for seeing me. Thank you for letting yourself be seen, Daniel replied. That takes more courage than most people realize. She drove to Sophie's school in a daze, replaying the interview, weighing possibilities, feeling the weight of a decision that felt simultaneously impossible and already made. When Sophie came running out, backpack bouncing, face bright with the particular joy of pickup time, Emily scooped her up and held on tight. Did you get the job, Mommy? Sophie asked when Emily finally put her down. I don't know yet, baby. I have to decide some things first. Did you try your hardest? I did. Then you already won, Sophie said with the certainty of someone who understood things adults had forgotten. Now you just have to pick which prize you want. And sitting there in the school parking lot, watching her daughter dig through her backpack for the artwork she'd made that day, Emily realized Sophie was right. For the first time in 2 years, she wasn't just reacting to circumstances. She was choosing. She had options. She had value. She had worth that multiple companies had recognized and wanted. The question wasn't whether she was good enough. The question was what she wanted to build with that goodness, now that she finally believed it existed. Emily made her decision that evening after Sophie was asleep, sitting at their small kitchen table with 2 pieces of paper in front of her. On the left, she'd written everything Innovate Digital offered: higher salary, established reputation, immediate security, the validation of a traditional career path, the ability to tell people she was a creative director at a company they'd heard of. On the right, she'd listed what Helion Systems represented: lower starting salary but growth potential, the chance to build something from scratch, working with people who valued her perspective, the opportunity to help others like her, alignment with values she'd forgotten she was allowed to prioritize. The logical choice was Innovate Digital, the safe choice, the choice that would let her sleep without waking at 3 a.m. wondering if she'd made a catastrophic mistake that would hurt Sophie. But sitting there in the quiet apartment, looking at Leo's jellyfish drawing tape to her refrigerator, Emily realized that safety had its own cost. The cost of wondering what might have been. The cost of choosing security over meaning. The cost of teaching Sophie that fear should guide your decisions more than hope. She picked up her phone and typed an email to Stephanie Morgan at Innovate Digital, thanking her for the offer and the opportunity, but explaining that she'd decided to pursue a different direction. Her finger hovered over the send button for a full minute before she pressed it, and then it was done. No taking it back, no safety net. Then she opened a new email to David Park. David, thank you for facilitating yesterday's interview. After careful consideration, I'm writing to accept the position at Helion Systems. I'm excited to build the creative community platform and to work with a team that shares my values around supporting independent professionals. When would you like me to start? Best, Emily Carter. She sent it before she could second-guess herself, then sat back and took a shaky breath. Terror and exhilaration fought for dominance in her chest, neither one winning. She'd just turned down more money and more security to take a risk on something that might fail, that might not be everything she hoped, that might turn out to be a mistake. But it might also be exactly what she needed, what Sophie needed, what hundreds or thousands of struggling creatives needed. Her phone buzzed 30 seconds later. David, apparently working late. Emily, wonderful news. Daniel will be thrilled. Can you start Monday? We move fast here, but not in a way that disrespects your personal life. If you need more time to transition, just let us know. Monday, 4 days away. Emily felt her heart rate spike, then settle. 4 days to figure out childcare logistics, to tell Sophie they were entering a new chapter, to prepare herself for walking into a job that felt simultaneously too big and exactly right. Monday works perfectly. Thank you. She slept better that night than she had in months. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation and nervous energy. Emily told Sophie about the new job, about how Mommy would be working at an office helping people who made art and stories and beautiful things. Sophie wanted to know if Emily's office had a cafeteria like her school did, and whether there would be other kids there, and if she could come visit sometime. Emily answered each question honestly, admitting what she didn't know yet, promising that they'd figure it out together. On Sunday evening, Sophie drew a picture of Emily at a desk surrounded by smiling stick figures, all of them creating things, paintings and books, and what might have been either a sculpture or a very ambitious sandwich, the artistic intent unclear. She presented it to Emily with great ceremony. "This is for your first day," Sophie said. "So you remember that lots of people are happy you're helping them, even if you can't see them all at once." Emily taped it to the inside of her portfolio, right where she'd see it every time she opened it. "Thank you, baby. I'll look at it whenever I need to remember why I'm doing this." "You're doing it for me," Sophie said with 5-year-old certainty. "And for you. Mrs. Patterson says we're allowed to do things for ourselves too. That's not selfish, that's smart." Emily pulled Sophie into a hug, marveling as always at how children could articulate truths that adults spent years unlearning. Mrs. Patterson is very wise. Monday morning arrived cold and clear, the kind of November day that made Portland feel crisp and full of possibility. Emily dropped Sophie at school with extra kisses and promises that she'd hear all about the first day at pickup. Then she drove downtown with butterflies in her stomach and hope in her chest, arriving at the Helion Systems building 20 minutes early because being late on her first day felt like tempting fate. David met her in the lobby with a warm smile and a visitor badge that he explained would be replaced with a permanent one by the end of the week. "Welcome to Helion," he said. "We're genuinely excited to have you here." He led her through the security checkpoint and up to the 15th floor, where a small group of people had gathered near a desk that Emily realized with a start was hers. Daniel was there, along with Sarah, Marcus, and 3 other people Emily didn't recognize. They were standing around the desk with slightly awkward smiles, and as Emily approached, Marcus started a slow clap that the others joined with varying degrees of enthusiasm and self-consciousness. "Sorry," Marcus said, laughing. "Daniel said we shouldn't make a big deal of your first day, but Sarah insisted on at least a small welcome, and it somehow turned into this." "I regret nothing," Sarah said. "New team members deserve celebration. Emily, this is Jen from HR, Tom from IT, and Alexis from Finance. They'll be helping you get set up today." Emily shook hands with each of them, overwhelmed by the genuine warmth of the greeting. No one seemed to be performing. No one was trying to impress her or establish dominance or position themselves in some invisible hierarchy. They were just people who worked together and were happy to have another person joining them. "Your computer is already set up," Tom said, gesturing to the desk where a sleek laptop sat waiting. "Latest model, fully loaded, with all the software Daniel said you'd need. If you run into any technical issues, just message me directly. I'm usually faster than the official IT ticket system." "And I have about 17 forms for you to fill out," Jen added apologetically. "Benefits elections, tax documents, emergency contacts, all the boring but necessary stuff. I've blocked an hour on your calendar this afternoon so we can go through everything together." "I'm here for budget questions and expense processes," Alexis said, "which I know sounds boring, but I promise I'll make it as painless as possible. Also, welcome. We're really glad you're here." Daniel waited until the others had dispersed before approaching Emily's desk. "How are you feeling?" "Terrified," Emily admitted. "But in a good way? Is that possible?" "Absolutely. The best things I've ever done started with terror." He gestured to the desk, which Emily now noticed had a small plant on it, something green and thriving in a ceramic pot. "That's from Leo. He picked it out yesterday. He said you needed something alive to take care of, so you'd remember to take care of yourself too." Emily felt her throat tighten. "That's incredibly sweet. He wanted to be here to give it to you himself, but school came first. He made me promise to tell you that it's a pothos, which is very hard to kill, so you don't need to worry about being a bad plant parent." Daniel smiled. His words, not mine. "Please tell him thank you, and that I promise to keep it alive." "He'll be relieved." He was genuinely concerned. Daniel pulled up a chair and sat down, his expression becoming more serious. "I want to be clear about expectations. This isn't going to be easy. Building a platform from scratch never is. There will be long days, frustrating setbacks, moments where you wonder if we're completely wrong about everything. I need you to know that going in." "I know," Emily said. "I'm ready for it." "I also want you to know that being ready for hard work doesn't mean sacrificing your personal life. You have a daughter who needs you. I have a son who needs me. Sarah's partner is finishing a graduate degree and needs support. Marcus is training for a marathon and needs time to run. We're all whole people with lives outside this office, and the work only matters if it's sustainable." He met her eyes. "So if you need to leave at 3 to pick up Sophie, you leave. If she's sick and you need to work from home, you work from home. If you need flexibility, we find ways to provide it, because a platform that claims to support independent creatives while burning out its own team is hypocritical at best and actively harmful at worst." Emily nodded, not trusting her voice. "One more thing," Daniel said. "I'm going to be wrong sometimes. I'm going to have ideas that sound good but don't work in practice. I'm going to miss things you see clearly. And I need you to tell me when that happens. Not diplomatically, not carefully, just honestly. The hierarchy here is real. I'm the CEO, you report to me, but it's not absolute. Good ideas matter more than title, and I'd rather be corrected than be wrong. Can you do that?" "Yes," Emily said, finding her voice. "I can do that." "Good." Daniel stood, then paused. "Emily, I meant what I said at the cafe. You being here isn't charity. It's not me doing you a favor. You earned this position by being exactly who you are. Someone who shows up, works hard, treats people with dignity, and cares about outcomes more than optics. Don't forget that on the days when imposter syndrome hits, because it will hit. It hits all of us." He left her to settle in, and Emily spent the next hour exploring her new workspace. The desk was positioned near a window with a view of the city. The chair was ergonomic in ways her thrift store kitchen chair had never been, and the laptop was so fast she initially thought it was broken because programs opened instantly instead of after prolonged negotiation. But more than the physical setup, what struck Emily was the atmosphere. People moved through the office with purpose, but not panic. Conversations happened naturally, some work-related, some not, without the performative quality of networking. She heard laughter from a nearby conference room where a team was apparently debugging code that had started displaying everything upside down. Someone's phone was playing music quietly, something instrumental and soothing. Through the glass walls of another room, she could see someone lying on the floor with headphones on, apparently taking a meditation break. This was what work could look like when it was designed for humans, instead of demanding humans design themselves for work. Sarah appeared at Emily's desk around 10:30 with 2 coffees and a conspiratorial smile. "Ready to dive in?" "Absolutely," Emily said, accepting the coffee gratefully. They spent the next 3 hours mapping out the platform's development roadmap. Sarah asked questions that forced Emily to think more deeply about implementation, challenged assumptions that didn't hold up under scrutiny, and built on ideas that had potential. They debated, disagreed, found common ground, and slowly transformed Emily's vision into something that could actually be built. "I want to introduce you to someone," Sarah said as they wrapped up. "She's been freelancing for 5 years, graphic designer, illustrator, occasional web developer. She's one of our beta testers for the platform. I thought it might be valuable for you to hear her perspective directly." The someone turns out to be a woman named Priya, mid-30s, with kind eyes and the slightly harried look of someone managing multiple deadlines simultaneously. They met in one of the quieter conference rooms, and Priya immediately put Emily at ease. Sarah said you used to freelance? Priya asked. Still do, technically, Emily said, though I guess now I'm employed and freelancing is my past. It's a weird transition. I bet. What made you take the leap? Emily thought about how to answer honestly without oversharing. I was tired of the fear, of lying awake wondering how I'd pay rent if a client didn't come through, of my daughter noticing that we couldn't afford things other families took for granted, of feeling invisible and expendable and like I was one bad month away from catastrophe. Priya nodded, her expression suggesting deep recognition. That's exactly what I'm hoping this platform addresses. The fear, the isolation, the constant anxiety of not knowing where the next project is coming from or if this client is going to be reasonable or a nightmare. They talked for over an hour about Priya's experience, the clients who'd asked for free work, the scope creep that doubled projects without doubling payment, the loneliness of working alone, the difficulty of knowing whether her rates were fair. Emily listened carefully, taking notes, asking follow-up questions, and seeing patterns emerge that matched her own experience. What would make the biggest difference? Emily asked finally. If you could have one thing that doesn't currently exist, what would it be? Priya didn't hesitate. Community. Not the fake networking kind where everyone's performing success. Real community where people admit when things are hard and help each other without expecting something in return. I have freelancer friends, but we all feel weird admitting when we're struggling because we don't want to seem like we're failing. So we all pretend we're fine and we're all actually terrified and no one tells the truth. Emily wrote that down, underlined it twice. What if the platform started there, with creating space for honest conversation about the reality of freelance work? That would be revolutionary, Priya said quietly. Just knowing I wasn't alone in how hard this is would change everything. After Priya left, Emily sat in the conference room for a few extra minutes, letting the conversation settle. This was why she'd chosen Helion over Innovate Digital. Not for the salary or the title or even the security, but for this, the chance to build something that acknowledged truth instead of selling fantasy, that supported people instead of exploiting them, that treated creativity as valuable work instead of a hobby that should be monetized more efficiently. She checked her phone and saw it was already 2:15. School pickup was in 45 minutes, which meant she needed to leave in 20 to account for traffic. She found David and told him she was heading out. Of course, he said without hesitation. See you tomorrow. And Emily? You did great today. Really great. She drove to Sophie's school with her heart full in a way it hadn't been in years. Not just hopeful, actually full, like she'd found something she hadn't known she was missing. Purpose, maybe. Or just the simple validation of work that mattered being recognized as mattering. Sophie came running out of school with a painting of what appeared to be a rainbow made of butterflies, explaining in elaborate detail the artistic choices involved. Emily listened with half her attention, the other half still processing her first day, already thinking about tomorrow's priorities, about the community Priya had described, about how to build trust when trust was exactly what most freelancers had lost. Mommy? Sophie said, apparently noticing Emily's distraction. Did you have a good first day? I did, baby, a really good one. Did people like you? I think so. Why? Because you deserve to be liked, Sophie said with the matter-of-fact certainty that came from love untainted by doubt. You're the best mommy and you work really hard and people should notice that. Emily pulled over into a parking lot, unable to drive through the tears that had suddenly blurred her vision. She twisted in her seat to look at Sophie. How did you get so wise? I'm not wise, Sophie said, confused. I'm 5. You can be both. Emily unbuckled and climbed into the back seat to hug her daughter properly. Thank you for believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. That's what families do, Sophie said, patting Emily's back with the gentle seriousness of someone comforting a hurt animal. We believe in each other when believing is hard. They drove home, stopping at the grocery store where Emily found herself buying the name brand cereal without checking the price first, then almost putting it back out of habit before making herself keep it in the cart. She could afford name brand cereal now. She could afford a lot of things now. The realization was still settling, still feeling too fragile to trust completely. That evening, after Sophie was in bed, Emily's phone rang. Daniel's name appeared on the screen, and Emily answered with a flutter of nervousness. Was something wrong? Had she misunderstood something about the job? Was he calling to tell her this had been a mistake? Emily, hi, Daniel said, his voice warm. I'm sorry to call so late. I wanted to check in about your first day. I know we talked this morning, but sometimes the reality doesn't match the expectation. How are you actually feeling? Emily let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Honestly, overwhelmed, but in a good way. Like I'm finally doing something that matters. That's exactly how I hoped you'd feel. She could hear the smile in his voice. Listen, Leo wanted me to ask you something. We're going to Brew and Bloom on Saturday morning. It's become our tradition, breakfast at the cafe where we met. He wanted to know if you and Sophie would like to join us. No pressure if you're busy or if it's too much too soon, but he was very insistent that I ask. Emily felt something warm bloom in her chest. We'd love to. Sophie's been asking about Leo since I told her about the jellyfish drawing. Perfect. Say 9:30? We can have breakfast and the kids can entertain each other while we talk about the platform. Or don't talk about work at all. Whatever feels right. 9:30 works great. Daniel? Yeah? Thank you for all of this, for seeing me, for taking a chance on me, for building a company that actually cares about people. Thank you for being someone worth taking a chance on, Daniel said quietly, and for reminding me why I started this company in the first place. Sometimes you get so caught up in growth metrics and quarterly reports that you forget the human element. Meeting you reset something important. They said goodnight, and Emily sat in the quiet apartment, her laptop open to the platform mock-ups she'd been sketching. Sophie's butterfly rainbow taped to the wall beside Leo's jellyfish drawing. The pothos plant sitting on her windowsill catching the streetlight through the glass. Her life looked different than it had a week ago. Not dramatically different from the outside, maybe, but internally transformed in ways that mattered more. Saturday morning arrived sunny and unseasonably warm, the kind of November day that felt like a gift. Emily and Sophie walked into Brew and Bloom at 9:25 to find Daniel and Leo already there, seated at the same table where everything had started. Leo was drawing in his notebook and Daniel was reading something on his phone, and they looked so peaceful that Emily almost hated to interrupt. But Leo looked up and his face transformed with joy. You came! Dad said you would, but I was worried maybe you'd forget or be too busy or... He stopped himself, taking a breath. I'm really glad you're here. We're really glad to be here, Emily said. Leo, this is my daughter Sophie. Sophie, this is Leo and his dad Daniel. Hi, Sophie said with the careful politeness of someone meeting new people. My mommy said you draw jellyfish. Can I see? Leo immediately opened his notebook to show Sophie his ever-expanding jellyfish collection. They bent their heads together over the pages, and within 30 seconds were deep in conversation about whether jellyfish could be friends with octopuses or if that would be weird because of the tentacles situation. Daniel caught Emily's eye and smiled. That was fast. And kids are better at connection than adults, Emily said. They haven't learned to be suspicious yet. They ordered breakfast, pancakes for the kids, coffee, and something substantial for the adults, and settled into comfortable conversation. They talked about Emily's first week at Helion, about the early platform feedback they'd gotten from beta testers, about Leo's latest battle with the bedroom monster who'd apparently violated the weekend-only agreement. Sophie shared her entire kindergarten social hierarchy in exhaustive detail, including who was mean, who was nice, and who was medium in a way that apparently required complex explanation. An hour passed, then another. The cafe filled with the usual Saturday crowd, but their table felt like its own little world. 2 parents, 2 kids, sharing space and stories, and the simple pleasure of being seen and accepted. Zoe, the barista, stopped by to refill their coffees and grinned at Emily. Good to see you back, and looking a lot happier than last time I saw you. I am happier, Emily said, significantly. That's what we like to hear. Zoe glanced at Daniel. You too. You look less like you're carrying the world on your shoulders. I am carrying slightly less world, Daniel agreed. After Zoe left, Emily said quietly, I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for this to somehow be too good to be true, for reality to reassert itself in some crushing way. It might, Daniel said honestly, Reality has a way of being complicated. The platform might struggle. We might hit technical problems, or budget constraints, or community challenges we didn't anticipate. It's not going to be easy, Emily. I know. But here's what I've learned. The hard things that matter are different than the hard things that don't. Struggling to build something meaningful feels different than struggling just to survive. Both are exhausting. But one kind of exhaustion leaves you empty, and the other kind leaves you full. He paused. And you don't have to do it alone anymore. That's the difference now. You have a team. You have resources. You have people who believe in what you're building because they believe in you. Sophie and Leo had abandoned their breakfast to draw together, creating some kind of collaborative masterpiece that appeared to involve jellyfish, butterflies, monsters, and what might have been either a castle or a very elaborate birthday cake. They were giggling about something, their heads bent close together, already forming the kind of friendship that came naturally to children who recognized kindred spirits. "They're going to be heartbroken when we have to leave," Emily observed. "Then let's not leave yet," Daniel said. "Let's order more coffee and let them draw and just exist here for a while. The work can wait. The emails can wait. Life is made of moments like this. Saturday mornings in cafes with people you care about. Everything else is just the stuff that happens between the moments." So they stayed. They talked about childhood memories and terrible bosses and the books they'd read recently and whether pineapple belonged on pizza, a debate that Sophie and Leo joined with passionate opinions on both sides. They talked about Daniel's late wife, about how Leo still missed her but was learning to carry the grief alongside joy. They talked about Sophie's father, who'd left before she was born and whose absence had shaped Emily's entire adult life in ways she was still processing. They talked about fear and hope and the strange alchemy that happened when you chose to trust people despite every reason not to. They talked about the cafe itself, about how a single table with an empty chair had changed both their trajectories in ways neither could have predicted. "I keep thinking about that morning," Emily said. "About how close I came to not offering you the chair. I was so absorbed in my own anxiety, so focused on the interview. If I'd been just a little more selfish, a little less willing to be inconvenienced, none of this would have happened." "But you weren't," Daniel said. "You chose kindness when you didn't have to. That's who you are, Emily. That's why this works." Around them, the cafe continued its Saturday rhythm. Couples on coffee dates, friends catching up, freelancers tapping away at laptops. And in the corner where everything had begun, two single parents and their children, building something that looked like family from the raw materials of chance and choice, and the simple decision to say yes when someone needed space. Months later, the creative community platform launched to immediate success. Not viral, explosive success, but something better. Organic, sustainable growth driven by word of mouth from people who'd found exactly what they needed and wanted their friends to have it too. The rate transparency tool helped freelancers negotiate fair pay. The community forums became spaces of genuine support. The matching algorithm connected creatives with clients who valued their work. And slowly, steadily, the platform began changing lives. Emily led the initiative with passion and competence that surprised no one except herself. She hired carefully, building a team that reflected diverse experiences and perspectives. She listened to user feedback and implemented changes quickly. She made mistakes and fixed them. She worked hard but went home at 3 to pick up Sophie, proving that you could do meaningful work without sacrificing the people you loved. Daniel watched her thrive and felt vindicated in his instinct. He'd built companies before, had hired hundreds of people, had seen success and failure in equal measure. But watching Emily transform from desperate freelancer to confident leader, from someone apologizing for her existence to someone owning her value, felt different. Felt like proof that business could be done differently, that success didn't require sacrificing humanity, that the best teams were built on kindness rather than exploitation. Leo and Sophie became inseparable. They had play dates every weekend, trading between Emily's small apartment and Daniel's too-large house. They started a business selling handmade bookmarks to their classmates, splitting the profits 50-50 and donating half to an animal shelter. They created an elaborate shared universe in their drawings, full of jellyfish kingdoms and butterfly democracies and reform monsters who'd agreed to stop being scary in exchange for friendship and acceptance. The cafe table became reserved in unofficial but absolute ways. Zoe started saving it when she saw either Daniel or Emily come through the door. Other regulars learned not to sit there on Saturday mornings. It became known as the kind people's table, after Leo's declaration that it was reserved for people who chose kindness over convenience. One Saturday, 6 months after Emily's first day at Helion, they were sitting at that table when Amanda Richardson walked in. Emily saw her first, felt her body tense reflexively, preparing for confrontation. But Amanda looked different, smaller somehow, less polished, carrying herself with none of the aggressive confidence that had marked their last interaction. She saw Emily and stopped, clearly debating whether to approach. Then she did, her expression cautious. "Emily," she said quietly, "I owe you an apology." Emily blinked, caught off guard. Daniel had gone still beside her, watchful but silent. "I was cruel to you," Amanda continued, "multiple times. I was insecure and threatened, and I took it out on you because you were an easy target. That was wrong. I'm sorry." "Thank you," Emily said carefully. "I appreciate you saying that. I also wanted you to know I left Morrison & Klein. I'm freelancing now, trying to figure out what I actually want instead of just climbing whatever ladder is in front of me." She laughed, but it was self-deprecating rather than bitter. "It's terrifying. I don't know how you did this for years." "Badly," Emily admitted. "I did it badly for years. I was always one crisis away from falling apart." "That's kind of where I am now," Amanda said. "Someone told me about your platform. I signed up yesterday. I'm hoping it'll help." Emily felt something shift in her chest. Not quite forgiveness, but something adjacent. The recognition that hurt people, that Amanda's cruelty had come from her own pain, that everyone was fighting battles no one else could see. "I hope it helps too. And Amanda, the community forums are really good. People are honest there. You don't have to perform success. You can just be honest about the struggle." Amanda nodded, her eyes bright. "Thank you, really, and congratulations on everything. You deserved it." She left, and Emily sat back, processing. Beside her, Daniel squeezed her hand briefly. "That was gracious," he said. "That was exhausting," Emily corrected, "but also necessary. I spent so long being angry at people like Amanda. At some point you have to let it go, or it poisons everything." "Wise and gracious," Daniel amended. Sophie and Leo were arguing amiably about whether their next bookmark design should feature dinosaurs or dragons, a debate that seemed destined to continue indefinitely. Emily watched them, felt Daniel's presence beside her, saw Zoe catch her eye and smile from behind the counter, and felt the weight of the past 6 months settle into something that looked like peace. This was what she'd been fighting for all along, she realized. Not just financial security, though that mattered. Not just professional success, though she was proud of what they were building. But this: community, connection, the ability to exist without performance or pretense, the chance to help people while being helped herself, the recognition that she didn't have to do everything alone anymore. "Daddy," Leo said, looking up from his drawing, "can we make a new rule for the table?" "What kind of rule?" Daniel asked. "Everyone who sits here has to promise to be kind to someone that day, even someone they don't know. Especially someone they don't know. Because that's how this started, right? Mommy Emily was kind to you when she didn't know you were important." "I was important before Emily knew who I was," Daniel said gently. "People don't become important because of their jobs or their money. They're important because they're people." "I know that," Leo said with the patience of someone explaining the obvious. "But lots of grown-ups forget. So we should remind them, with a rule." "That's a good rule," Sophie agreed. "And if they can't think of someone to be kind to, they have to be kind to themselves. Because Mrs. Patterson says that counts too." Emily and Daniel exchanged glances, both fighting smiles. "Mrs. Patterson is very wise," Emily said. "The wisest," Daniel agreed. They sat at their table as the morning stretched into afternoon, watching Portland move around them through the cafe windows. Somewhere out there, struggling freelancers were lying awake wondering if they'd make rent. Single parents were weighing impossible choices. People were working twice as hard for half the recognition, fighting to stay afloat, questioning their worth. But here at this table, marked by nothing except intention and memory. 4 people had found something rare. Not just professional success or financial security, but genuine connection. The kind of connection that happened when you chose to see people instead of looking through them. When you offered chairs without calculating return on investment. When you said yes to strangers who looked like they needed a moment of grace. Emily thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, desperate, exhausted, convinced she was failing at everything that mattered. She wished she could tell that Emily what was coming, that the disaster of an interview would lead to an opportunity she couldn't have imagined, that a simple act of kindness would change her entire trajectory, that she was doing better than she thought, that she was stronger than she knew, that she deserved the good things that were coming even if she couldn't believe it yet. But maybe that Emily had known something current Emily sometimes forgot, that showing up was enough, that doing your best was enough, that choosing kindness when you had every reason to choose self-protection was an act of revolution in a world that prioritized competition over compassion. "Thank you," Emily said quietly to Daniel. "For what?" "For asking if you could sit at my table, for seeing me, for building something that matters, for proving that business doesn't have to be brutal to be successful, for—" Her voice caught. "For everything." "Thank you for saying yes," Daniel replied, "for sharing your space when you didn't have to, for trusting me even though you had no reason to, for taking a risk on something uncertain, for building this platform into something better than I imagined, for reminding me that the best things in life start with simple kindness." They sat in comfortable silence after that, 2 people who'd found each other at exactly the right moment, who'd chosen hope over fear, who'd built something meaningful from the raw materials of chance and character and a single empty chair. The afternoon sun slanted through the cafe windows, casting everything in golden light. Leo and Sophie's laughter drifted up from their drawings. Zoe hummed while making someone's coffee. The city moved around them, full of people searching for connection, for meaning, for proof that kindness mattered in a world that often suggested otherwise. And at a small table in a neighborhood cafe, 4 people sat together proving that it did. That one small choice, offering a chair, accepting help, choosing vulnerability over self-protection, could rewrite destinies, could transform strangers into family, could remind everyone that sometimes the most important moments look like nothing special at all. Just 2 people sharing space, just someone asking permission, just someone else saying yes, just kindness, given freely, received gratefully, and multiplied infinitely through choice and chance, and the simple recognition that we're all floating in the same water, looking for connection, hoping someone will see us as we truly are and decide we're worth sharing space with. That's how everything changed. That's how lives were saved. That's how hope was restored. With a table, an empty chair, and 2 people brave enough to believe that kindness between strangers could be the beginning of something beautiful.